And welcome to the Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Jones, with Councillor Anang and Councillor Prenter substitute.
Thank you, Steve. Record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 30th of November as correct? Okay, we have no urgent matters. Disclosable pecuniary interest or other significant interest and whipping. Are there any declaration of disclosable pecuniary interest or other interest or any declarations of whipping? That brings us on to agenda item 5. I would like to welcome the portfolio holder for climate change and strategic regeneration, Councillor Curry. Councillor Curry, would you like to make any comment in relation to your report prior to questions?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you everyone for having me along to talk to you this evening at your meeting. I've got no particular comments, just a thanks to you all for giving me the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. Do we have any member? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Curry, for your report. It's two things I wanted to bring up. The first thing was about wardens, ward wardens, and how we're progressing with that. Because the ambition is to have a warden in every ward. How is that progressing at the moment? You could just update us on that.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I think I'll be honest with you. We drew up the plans to bring in the warden service last summer, but obviously since then we've come across serious budgetary constraints. So we have it all planned, we have it costed, and we've been looking into how we can deliver that service. It's likely that you'll be hearing more about it later in this year, how we're going back to delivering. But certainly it's one of our key things that we will be doing in the next couple of years. But it's a challenging time for the council in terms of budget constraints. So that's pretty much all I can say about that one.
Yeah, so it won't be sort of immediate as we thought it could be this year. So that looks like it could be down the line a bit.
No, honestly, I have to be really honest about that. It's about the money, as you probably realise. Right,
thank you. The second one, to do slightly with the environment and climate and that, we've got a road closure which has been coming up in Frinsby Hill in my ward, and it's going to close one part of the highways for about 3 months, it says. I've wondered if there's anywhere we could get any more mitigation in there. It's going to cause chaos around there. I think we're going to have pollution, noise pollution. There's going to be people cutting all around the different back streets of the local estate there. And what we may be suggesting, could they do a lot of the works before they actually close the road? Because it's the school entrance it's causing the problem. And I think it's going to cause absolutely chaos. I think you know the road itself, Councillor Curry, Frinsby Hill and that. It's bad enough as it is with 2 roads open. But I wonder if there's any way anything we can do to mitigate the problems are going to be for the local residents, on health and getting about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's difficult because this is quite a new situation that we've just come up in the last sort of week or so. And I think in terms of the climate impact, you're absolutely right. There will be traffic congestion. There will be issues around that. And if I may, Chair, I appreciate it's not quite within the scope, but I may as well sort of get to a couple of points that's been raised there, if that's okay. I think to make it clear, this is not a problem that we really have a great deal of control over. The development of the new school is the Department for Education and the academy that will be running the school. They control the works and how that's progressing. It is significantly behind time for various reasons that are, again, outside our control. They're aiming to open in September. In order to achieve that, they need to build their school entrance. And the contractors have made it very clear that they need to close that road. So we're looking at how we can achieve that and minimise the impact as much as possible. And I know behind the scenes our highways teams have been working their socks off to achieve the best outcome. It was going to be 19 weeks, it's now 15, so they've managed to get some, reduce that. And we are lobbying with the Department for Education to put more resources in to shorten that period even more, if at all possible. But again, it's kind of out of our hands in that respect. What we are doing is making sure that there will be no official roadworks within the Finsbury area around there to make sure that there isn't a second round of roadworks which causes even more problems, unless, of course, there's an emergency with gas or water or anything that has to be dealt with. So the highways teams are working very hard to mitigate and minimise the impact. They've got their diversionary projects in plan, in hand. They've been speaking to the bus companies, they've spoken to the emergency services, and obviously as we get up to March when this kicks off, there's more work being done to mitigate this as much as possible. But that's all I really know at the moment, and obviously it's something we'll be on literally every day, probably, as it has been this week, but we'll be doing our best to minimise this, because I appreciate this is going to be difficult for some residents around there. There's no hiding the fact that if you close a main road, it will cause problems. So we're doing the best we can to make sure that we minimise that impact.
Yeah, thanks for that. And, you know, what you can do, we appreciate it. But we was a bit disappointed that the local councillors weren't sort of asked about it, you know, for their views and that. 'Cause we, you know, we live locally and, you know, we're the best guys that know, but we wasn't really, it was sort of sprung on us. We didn't really know about it, and suddenly it's the same as yourself, it sprung on us. So, but anything to mitigate it will be good. If they want to come and talk to us about it as well, the local councillors, we'd be well willing to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a definite for that one. I'm happy to do that. And I would say that it got out into the press before we knew it was getting out into the press. So we hadn't actually anticipated. I think a certain local MP got hold of the news. So there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor William, and thank you for your answer, Councillor Curry. Councillor Herbert.
Yeah, just picking up by the comments of Councillor Williams. As you know, Councillor Williams, I know you weren't actually at the meeting in September 21, but you did give, Liz did give a verbal report because you weren't able to attend. But because you weren't at the meeting, you won't be aware that I voted against the planning application. So did Councillor Curry, and so, as you probably know, Councillor Etheridge as well. But prior to that, from 2019, when it was quite clear that the Conservative government, the Department of Education, and the then Conservative Council back in 2018-19 had decided on the Manor Farm for this site, I went to town saying that this would cause traffic chaos, as did Gary as well, Councillor Etheridge, as it all did. So it's nothing new that it was going to appear. And because you know it's not just a simple entrance into a school, it is actually a major junction, because it's actually, bizarrely, because of the hybrid application which was pushed forward by the former chair of planning, meant that it was also access to a housing estate that would probably never get built. So we're talking about a major junction. So to say that you weren't aware that something was going to come, we all knew it was going to come along. There's been closures at that point for some time now, often on as they've done some works going in and out of the school, you know, moving the utilities. So this is nothing unexpected. So I do find it quite extraordinary. You wanted to make an issue. Now I'm going to ask Simon a question. Simon, welcome. Thank you for your report. The only difference about this report and the last one, you don't mention my name. So I'm a little bit upset. Not really. So Medway North's strategic matters is covered by this committee. And because I asked a question about Medway North at the last committee about the green spaces. Now, the existing site at Gillingham Pier is not adequate. No. And what I know we've been thinking for some time about an alternative location. I was wondering if you can give us an update of where we are on that.
I think in terms of the sort of plans for a depot for the North, is this for the waste disposal lorries, the RCVs, the refuse collection vehicles? I think we've put it out there that we're putting together a waste strategy for Medway. And there hasn't been one in the past, and we really do need one. And in the context of that strategy, there are a number of major issues. One of them is about the replacement of the fleet. Nearly 50 vehicles that we've got are all of the same age, and they're all running out of energy and falling apart all at the same time. In fact, a couple of years ago, this was a problem and wasn't dealt with under the previous administration. So we've kind of grasped the nettle because we have to. It's costing about £30,000 a month to maintain the RCV fleet. So we have made the money available to start replacing the vehicles, and we'll do this in a sort of sustained way with a number of issues that we take into consideration when buying a new fleet of vehicles on this scale. It's very expensive, about 50 vehicles in total that we'll be purchasing to gradually replace the fleet over the next few years. So that's a challenge, and within the context of that, we have to be conscious of decarbonisation, which goes right into the heart of our climate agenda, which is part of my report. If we're going to decarbonise our vehicle fleets for Medway Council, we have to start now. There's no point in waiting 5 years and then doing it. If we're going to hit the 2050 target, never mind any earlier targets, the 2050 target, we've got to start that work right now. So we're looking at how we can decarbonise the waste fleet. And the number of factors that we have to take into consideration there is, if we use electric vehicles, on vehicles the size of an RCV, those batteries that they run on are huge. They're very expensive, and they're not the ideal means. I'm getting all the information we get is that if it's a large-scale vehicle, actually hydrogen fuel is your best bet, which we don't have available properly in this country at the moment, but it is something that's coming quite soon. People may have seen in the press that hydrogen fuel is being looked at very seriously by this government and certainly by the Labour Party as well. So that's coming. And equally, the use of things like biofuels, which are not as ideal because they still do have a certain level of carbon in them. They are certainly a lot more environmentally friendly than diesel, which we've got at the moment. And the nice thing about biofuels is that biofuel can be used in Euro 6 diesel vehicles. So that we're looking at that in detail. If we are to decarbonise the fleet, then we need a new depot. The current one on Pier Road isn't up to standard, so we are looking at alternative sites to do that, where we can install electric charging for the smaller vehicles and these vehicles that we use for street cleansing and stuff like that, but also where we will hopefully in due course 5-10 years from now, whenever it comes, we'll be able to put some hydrogen storage on them. So we need to find a new depot. So that's part of our fleet, part of our waste strategy going forward, is to do that piece of work. And there are a number of sites that the staff within the frontline services team are looking at, where we can possibly move a current site from Pier Road to there as time goes by. So that's where we are at the moment. We're looking at sites, we're replacing the fleet, we have to decarbonise, so we have to look at how we can do that as part of our overall strategy. Hope that's clear.
Obviously, a lot of the guys who work on the refuse lorries walk into work. And we don't have any means of transport. And when I'm often going through Medway City Estate at the end of their day, they've got out the cab, and some of them are going back from there, and the drivers are taking back the vehicles back to the depot. So any site that needs to be within a reasonable distance of buses, whatever, so the guys can travel and walk into work. Have you given us any thought to that?
There we go, button's working. Yes, the answer to that, because obviously it's something that's very important. It's part of our climate agenda. The more people can travel by public transport or walk or cycle to work, the better. Congestion issues are a problem, particularly around along Pier Road and stuff like that. So the answer is yes. And I would also add that Andy Mann, who runs that depot like clockwork, is all over me about this one. He's very keen. He's very conscious of the fact that his staff mostly live locally around the area. A lot of them walk to work, so definitely I won't be allowed to forget that one, simply because he keeps telling me that he's quite proud of the fact, and it's a good thing. So yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hubbard, could you put in your microphone, please?
Oh, it went off. Yeah, thank you. Obviously, when I drive into work, I go past the along Pier Road, so I often see them walking in. Now, at the last meeting, the last regen, I asked you a question about Norse and green spaces. But the reason for asking that question, because I've got recently concerned since May that things are not quite right with Norse's overall contracts. And I wonder if you can explain where we are with having formalising informal contracts with Norse.
There we go. Yeah, I think the situation at the moment is ongoing. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. One of the things we've looked at, and giving you a wider picture, if I may, is about the council's local authority trading companies, the LATCOs, if you like. There's three of those. There's Kindy, MDC, and there's Medway Norse. Kindy and MDC are solely owned by the council, and we've set up a new structure for those, thanks to a lot of hard work by the legal team, and the shareholder boards for those are now in place, and they met for the first time just yesterday. So we've got that. But with Medway Norse, it's a more complex relationship we have with them because of the joint venture situation. We're looking to go towards a more sort of client-contractor relationship with them. Obviously, rewriting a government structure and looking at how we approach that is more complex in the joint venture situation, so it's taking a bit more time. So it's an ongoing situation. The discussions are still kind of in their infancy, but we're looking at how we get to that point where we can do sort of make it a much simpler and more client-contractor-based relationship.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard, and thanks for your answer. We've got a few members indicating they want to ask you some questions. So we've got Councillor Luella Prenter, and after that will be Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon, for the report, for coming along. It's clear there's a lot of work that's been going on, so that's really good news. I'm just going to ask about more, if that's all right. So, well, just bits from your report. I can see here about the installation of green roof bus shelter. There's one in the intro. Is that something that's going to be rolled out across the towns, or is it just in the high spots for climate? That's one part. Another one is, with the Solar Together Kent scheme, you said the 42 residents have had solar panels since spring 23. Is that an improvement from previous years? Because there's no sort of comparison. I wondered if there'd been any, if it's gone up or down with the cost of living crisis. Sorry about this, I've got lots of little notes here. With one of the issues we get particularly in the centre of Gillingham is litter everywhere, and the high street team do a really good job trying to keep on top of it. They're out there all the time, the street scene people constantly picking up. But is there more that can be done for the education for people to just stop dropping it? I mean, there's enough bins everywhere, but is there more that can be done there? And then the last point I picked up on was about the buses and how we obviously there's work going on about trying to improve the bus routes and having more people on buses, less in cars. But there is the £2 offer that's on at the moment, and I think that runs until, the subsidy runs until December this year, if I'm correct. But we sort of stopped hearing about it in terms of promoting it to people. So there are still a lot of people in Medway who don't know it's only £2. And so if that was constantly promoted, I'm sure there might be more usage. I don't know if there's a plan for that, and that's my question, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura. I'll start at the top with the green roofs on the buses, on the bus shelters. That's a one-off at the moment. It was a specific grant that we were given through the government to do a small project like that. However, it's obviously a really lovely thing to do. So as soon as we can find the funding to do more of that, the better. And what would be nice, and this is something I have talked with the climate team about, is about how we could possibly do that with sponsorship and things like that. I mean, there's certainly, you know, if local firms want to help out in the same way that, for example, along Rochester High Street, a lot of the local firms help with watering the hanging baskets and stuff like that. Perhaps they can help with the looking after the bus stop roofs as well near their businesses and stuff. So there's hopefully some ways forward where we can take that out more, because it's quite an exciting thing to do. And just as a sort of an aside, really, it sounds a bit of an odd thing to have a green roof on a bus shelter, but actually it's just one more bit where we can add to that decarbonisation, and it helps with pollution, and it helps with biodiversity and all the other things. It may sound small, but when you do more of it, it becomes a big thing. So definitely more of the same once we can find some more funding for it, either through the private sector or government grants. So that hopefully deals with that one. On the solar together, this is very exciting, and there's different. I like to think of these people as pioneers. The working closely with Kent County Council for a number of years now, since we declared our climate emergency in 2019, we've been looking to encourage people to have solar panels put on their homes. There are some companies who do that in a kind of dodgy way and a not very well done way. So the Solar Together project really helps people find the right contractors to do this work, and it sort of promotes the value of all this. It really does make, if you can afford to do it, it makes a huge difference to your household bills. So the people who've done it, the 42 that we've got there, I think they've got about 70 something on their books at the moment, people who want to do it. And it has slowed down a little bit. The cost of living is making a difference. It's difficult for people to find the capital required. It does pay it back over a few years as your bills go down, which is really nice to see. But certainly I'd love to see more of that sort of pioneering. If people feel the urge to do it, then go ahead and do it. And I know quite a few friends, and in fact a couple of my family as well, who've gone down that route now and are doing it. And I know a certain councillor might have a solar panel on his shed roof, charging his tools for his gardening and his work as well. Just sitting over there, Councillor Williams. So they're really valuable things to have. And I think that that's on the smaller scale, but on the larger scale, solar panels are incredibly important. And we've been had some really good discussions with Mid-Kent College, who are decarbonising their buildings fast. So they're looking at putting a huge amount of solar panels on the Mid-Kent College campus just up the road from here. And I think they're aiming at 2025. And between their campus in Medway and the campus in Maidstone, there's a significant reduction in the costs of their energy that they use, and they may even be contributing to the grid with the things they're doing. So it's very exciting what they're doing, and obviously tying in that to Gun Wharf and the redevelopment of Gun Wharf, which was landed on us unexpectedly just before Christmas. We'll be looking at how we can do similar work there as well. So yeah, it's the solar panel thing is very, very important. The take-up of it.
It's gone down slightly.
Yeah, I think it's kind of stabilised at the moment with less people coming forward, but certainly it's something we're trying to promote quite hard. I'll probably mention more about the community working group as well about that. So just going to about the litter and the problems in Gillingham Town Centre. I think you're right. You're not alone. Luton Road, my own ward, has a lot of litter problems along it as well. And partly, I have to confess, it's the black sacks that's the problem. If you put the black sacks out the night before and the foxes get into it, or the pigeons or whatever, and the cats, then the rubbish is going to get blown about. So it's about encouraging people to put them out in the morning if they possibly can. But equally, I think you're right about the education side of it. Just asking people not to drop. It's something that I think, going back to my childhood, I remember it was going on back then, and the messaging is still going out, particularly through Keep Britain Tidy, who do a fantastic job, and we work with them every year on the Great British Spring Clean, with loads of volunteers going out every year, and the staff who run the environmental engagement team do a great job doing that kind of work and encouraging litter pickers all over Medway to do their bit. And I can't remember how many sacks they collect, but it was in the hundreds last year when they did that. So it's brilliant work. So the message is getting out there, but we can always do more. And I'd just, if I may, Chair, take this opportunity just to mention about the new working groups that we've set up. We've got, under the climate agenda that we're running now, since last May, we're sort of taking it on further from what was done under the previous administration and building on the work that was done by them, to set up two new groups, which I refer to in my report. One is the cross-party members working group, and the other one is the community working group. Now, the cross-party members group has met once, and they're meeting again, I think in March the next meeting is, and that's had quite a lot of input there. And through that, we're developing a ward improvement plan, sort of working paper has gone out to them all now about how they can have a specific plan for their ward. And hopefully, and this is a call out, I'll put this out now, there will be 59 plans across every ward in Medway with all of us doing our own bit for the environment. And that will make a big difference for something like litter and other issues as well, and certainly getting the message out more. So I'm encouraging all our members to join in with that, and there'll be more coming out in March about that. And the other group, which is the community working group, we've now got a significant number of community organisations that have signed up to that. We've had 2 meetings now, including health groups, obviously the eco hubs that we know about in Rainham and Rochester, the friends groups, the green spaces, but we've got the army have come along to that group now, and we've got other organisations turning up. And the outreach that's being achieved through that group is quite remarkable, and the messaging through the community groups. If you put something on Facebook on Rainham Eco Hub, it goes to about 12,000 people in one hit, you know. So you can really reach a lot of people through the community working group that we've got now. And certainly the messaging on littering is part of that. So hopefully we'll get there. It's going to take time, but we're sort of building up that strong community network to get the message out to everybody. And then your other question was on the buses. I've got some news and some slow progress, I think, on the buses. With regard to that, the way we operate our bus services in Medway is primarily they're privately run services. Arriva is the biggest company, and other companies like New Venture and ASD, one or two others, they run a smaller level service. But within the context of their work, we have our subsidised routes, so we pay the bus services on those routes which aren't commercially viable but are important to the community. We pay them a subsidy every year. Some of that money is from our own coffers, but some of it is also from the Department for Transport. What we'd like to do, and we're working now, we've met with the bus companies on a number of occasions. We have a bus working park group sort of thing, which meet quite regularly. And we've set up a workshop at the end of this month, actually it's coming on now, where we've invited the bus companies in, and we're looking at a number of very key things. One of them is the routes they run. Are the routes they're running now actually what we want for Medway? Which I think some of them aren't, and we need to change those. So we're doing a lot of work with the highways team on how we improve the routes. Everybody knows Rob Carman's passion for buses and stuff like that, so he's been putting a lot into this, as well as the other team. The other thing we're looking at is quality of service. I think everybody's experienced the fact that some of the residents and even ourselves and some of our family members have been stuck at a bus stop for 2 hours waiting for something to turn up that doesn't arrive. Well, we've got to change that. We need a better quality service. And the third factor in there is affordability, going back to what you were saying about the £2. So it's looking at routes, looking at quality and looking at affordability and building that into our thinking. And the bus companies are really up for this. The exciting thing from their point of view is this is a business opportunity. If we can get more people on the buses, that can't be a bad thing for them from a business perspective. The population of Medway is growing fast. If we build the 28,500 houses between now and 2040 that the government wants us to build, that's a population increase of about 50,000 people in Medway. And that's a lot more people. We'd rather they didn't drive every day. We'd rather they took public transport. And I think the bus companies see that as a business opportunity. So they're happy to work very closely with us on that. And aspects of that bus work as well is around decarbonisation. Again, going back to one of my passions about how we get the diesel off the road. It's so important, and they're looking at that as well, whether they can, again, have electric buses like they have in London, although that, again, is limited on how it can be developed because of the amount of charging available that's through the network and stuff like that, but also they're an expensive way of providing buses. But we're working on that together, and we'll come up with things. So I could talk about buses all evening if you want me to, because I'm quite passionate about them, but I'll stop there, if that's all right.
Thank you, Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is to do with the buses as well. Obviously, a lot of initiatives going into trying to cut emissions and improve air quality. But one thing I've noticed when I've been out and about across the towns, and probably a lot of other people, we've got buses that are up to 20 years old. So currently there's a bus route that's running an 04 plate, that's a Euro 3 engine, and they've got a lot of Euro 5. Them sort of engines are being outlawed in London because of the emissions and the links. of cases for young people. But we seem to still be running, the bus companies, I know they're private, still running them fleets. What's actually being done to with the bus companies to try and encourage them to take these dangerous fleets off our roads?
Yeah, that's a really important issue, and I think that as part of this workshop that I've mentioned just now, that's part of the conversation is about emissions and decarbonisation and how we go around that. I was very disappointed in hearing that Arriva had brought in some Euro 6s and then pulled them out again. I think that was a year or so ago. I'm not sure exactly what happened with that. And I think I'll be honest, without making too much of it, under the previous administration, buses were not a priority. It was about making the roads, and driving was considered to be the best option for people. I don't think it is. I mean, I drive a car myself. I'm not anti-car. I obviously have to use it and everything, and most of us do. But equally, at the end of the day, the future is not a car-driven future. It's not a petrol or diesel car future. It's an electric car, and it's a public transport future that we've got. There are parts of London, I mean, I've got sort of friends and family around the Borough Market, London Bridge area, and honestly, the air pollution there is virtually zero. I mean, it's electric buses, and you can't hear a car at all. There's hardly anything. It's fantastic, and everybody walks around there and walks along the embankment and stuff like that. It's fantastic. And we could have parts of Medway like that in Chatham and Gillingham and over in Strood that could be like that in our urban areas. So we can certainly work towards that much more use of public transport, and encouraging the bus companies to bring Euro 6s in is part of the conversation that I'm definitely having. Apart from anything else, the Euro 6s can take biofuels as well. So there's a plus there. And I know Transport for London use biofuels because there's a company in Medway that supplies biofuel to Transport for London. So we'd rather they supplied it to us here if we could get them to. So there is a lot of positives in what you say about that, I think. And I think the other issue, which is really dear to my heart, is access to the peninsula and the Cuxton Valley. At the moment, the services out there are pretty poor, and we need to really address that issue. And that would be smaller. I think that should be smaller vehicles. That's the way my mind is going on that at the moment. And if they're smaller vehicles, they can be electric. So for example, one of the ways we're looking at that is to say, well, at Strood Station, we own the land next to Strood Station. Is it possible to put a bus station next to Strood Station and have that servicing the peninsula, and people can come in? And Strood Station is ideally placed for a mixed transport hub because it links to Maidstone, it links to London, and it links to Dover and Margate down the coast. So there's a train links all across Kent, plus a really good quality electric bus service out to Peninsula would be ideal. If I could just expand the point slightly further, Chair, if you don't mind, because I'm quite excited about this. People are probably aware of Haven Holidays out at All Hallows and what they've done there. They've created this fantastic holiday centre out there. I've spoken to them, and currently they don't really have a proper bus service for their clients and their customers out there. Ideally, wouldn't it be lovely if you were living in London and you could catch a train down to Strood, get on an electric bus and be on holiday within 2 hours of leaving your home, be in a lovely place like All Hallows at the Haven Holiday Centre there. So that's a possibility, and I think the Haven Company are quite keen on that idea. So we're looking into sort of schemes like that to get eco-tourism up and running and all that kind of stuff. But we do need the transport infrastructure to make it happen, and that's the kind of thinking that we've got on this. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that all sounds really great. I love your comment about London. Spending my first nearly 30 years in London, I knew that I could get a bus at any time of the day and night to get me home, so having a car wasn't always a priority. Across Medway, a lot of the bus routes stop at 7 o'clock. That's not just to the outskirts, that's even to the main town areas. So to encourage people onto buses when we've got people working till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, you've got people working in the pubs and the clubs. If they haven't got a vehicle, they're not getting home. And some of the roads we've got around here, people don't drive safely. So if we don't give them that option that's going from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10, 11 o'clock at night, it is not an option for probably about 50% of our residents, if not more.
I think that's a really good point. I think, I mean, there's a good example in Amazon, for example, who run their own bus service because they might as well. So what they've got is a bus that goes from Maidstone, the train station in Maidstone, picks up workers there, stops at Strood, picks up workers from Strood, and then drives out to the Amazon depot, and they run it through their shift system to make sure their workers can get in and out. Now, that should be a public transport network. I mean, I can appreciate private companies doing that, but equally, there should be a public transport network that gets our workforce to work on time, regardless of the shift patterns and that. And we could have that if we want to. And what we've been doing, one thing we have been doing, is we've met with the companies at Kingsnorth. That's a major employment site and there's a lot of plans for expanding the employment there, has been for a number of years, and yet again the bus service out there is really poor. So we need to look at how the commercial companies can actually provide a really decent service. And they're up for it. We've had discussions with them, so we're going to try and put that in place.
Thank you. Councillor Anand.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Carey. Yeah, I just want to find out with the session for homeowners and about the 3 energy efficiency information sessions. How will you be promoting it, and why are you targeting only homeowners? What about those who are renting? What I'm saying is that session 3.5, the third bullet point, it says 3 energy efficiency information sessions for homeowners in partnership with the University of Greenwich. And I'm asking, why are you targeting only homeowners, and how will you be promoting or advertising those sessions?
Apologies. I think the main way we're getting the message out there, generally speaking, to the community in Medway, if I can just expand again, if you don't mind. Medway Council cannot solve the climate crisis in Medway. This just, I mean, we can't do it alone. We have to do it in partnership with as many organisations and people as we can, almost household by household. And I think in order to do that, we have to get the message out to as many groups as possible. So the way we're looking at doing that is twofold, and I mentioned the 2 working groups. The community working group, which is now up and running and has quite a wide reach, and through the members working group as well. And if I can just sort of go into a bit more detail in that. So on the community working group, we've got the Mid-Kent College, a part of that now. So all the student population there, we can reach them. We talk to the universities as well. And as many ways as we possibly can to promote these events. I'm looking at hopefully perhaps running some sort of conference in the summer would be a nice thing to do. So I'm just sort of trying to formulate the ideas around how we do that and get some events organised. And certainly any other campaigns and stuff like that we can get out there, we will do that promotion work. And then with regard to the members working group, this is where we come in. All of us have our residents, and we're the best people in the council to contact our residents. And so we've got the bones of what we call a ward improvement plan for climate put together. The group are going to look at that again in March. And as I say, hopefully every member of the council will have it in their hand or have it as an attachment on an email, and they can go out and look at projects in their area and talk to their residents about what they feel they can do to address the climate issues within the area. Where they should be recycling more, where they can plant a tree in their garden, or where they can help out with the local green space, whatever it is they want to do. And that simple plan for each ward is another way of getting it. And then just as saying about the bus stops, if you add that cumulative engagement together, suddenly it starts to make a difference. Within the context of that, it's how we then measure the success. So the ward improvement plans will have a means of reporting back of what's going on in our community, and the climate staff and the climate team will pull that together. And so you'll be getting reports on how much work is actually going on across Medway. Hopefully I've addressed your problem. Is that okay? There's a lot of work to be done. It's early days. I appreciate that, but I think we're starting on that journey together, if you like.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. First, apologies for being a few minutes late. It was in my downloaded diary at 6:30, so there's obviously some issues around the diary that you download. Thank you for your report, Simon. Just a few questions. Since May, when you took over the administration, what are the CO2 emissions that have decreased? And how do you measure that in Medway? Of the 42 houses that have installed solar panels, which by my calculation is something like 0.04% of the households in Medway, which is a very, very low number, what CO2 contribution or reduction do you think that's made to the area? And how much how much CO2 is created in manufacture, transport, installation, and how long will that be before it even breaks even, by your calculations, or does the climate group know? We mentioned buses. I doubt very much if any of us came by public transport tonight. We're not actually, one maybe, but we're not actually setting a very good example here. And I think that examples, if we need to ask partners to improve, we need to start setting examples ourselves. You've mentioned the waste trucks and the capital expenditure that we approved in full council a few months ago. I was very disappointed they weren't electric. We know of other councils that have gone fully electric. Even if we want to persuade some of our partners to have low emissions and drive that way, we should be setting an example as well. So I am disappointed that the first capital expenditure that under your leadership, that you didn't push wholeheartedly to go electric, like some other councils, I think, in London and elsewhere in Manchester have gone fully electric. So it's not impossible to go fully electric. What else is there? Of the bus shelter, how many bus shelters do we have in Medway? And how much did the green roof cost? And how do we measure the effectiveness of those green roofs? I mean, I presume they're not just to look pretty; they're there to do something, like collect running water or whatever. So, is there any measurement for those things? And the climate Change Action Group plan, has that got a target to reduce CO2 emissions in Medway? And if so, by how much and by when? Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Gary. Quite a number of issues there you want me to cover. I'll just deal with the CO2 question, the last one first, if I may. There's two issues around that. Obviously, decreasing carbon, decarbonisation, as it's called, is a kind of global thing that's trying to be achieved at the moment. We do have our crisis globally. The UK government is doing what it can in terms of government targets and stuff like that, and the new 25-year environment plan that was published by the government last year, I think it was last year, is now kicking in a number of different ways. So as far as CO2 emissions are concerned, we are supposed to be trying to bring those down at a national level. However, the current government seems to be backing away from a lot of that, with more gas fields and oil fields being given licenses in the North Sea and stuff like that, which is a bit of an odd position for this government to take, but obviously there's politics behind that. And then as the national targets are set, then our own Medway targets contribute to that. And we work closely with Kent, so it's a Kent and Medway target, and there's a joint group of officers that come together to discuss that. And just recently, there's a new members working party kind of approach that's starting to emerge, but I don't know the full details of that. I think it's just gone through some of the Kent leaders' meetings have been discussing it, and I'm not sure of the full details. So in terms of how our CO2 levels are going down, that's the kind of reporting structure and how it feeds in. The target is 2050 to be carbon zero or carbon neutral if we can. I mean, that's a long way off as a target. It was set a number of years ago. It ties into the global temperature rise of 1.5 degrees, which we're trying to avoid but failing dramatically, part of the Paris Agreement back in 2015. And the COP meetings have met every year since then and not really achieved a huge amount, to be frank. So it's a struggle on an international level. So if we were looking at 2050 as a target, it's going to be a struggle. Ideally, we'd like to bring that target down and make it 2040 or 2035. 2025 if we can. But I think some of those numbers are just more sort of headline number rather than what we feel we can achieve, because at the moment it's about collaborative working on a sort of international level, and that's a struggle. So the 2050 target is our target. That's the national target, and that's what we're trying to work towards in Medway as well, and we're sticking with that at the moment. As far as I'll go back up about you were asking about properties and CO2, which I don't have those numbers to hand. I'm sorry, Chair, I didn't bring that sort of level of detail to the meeting, so I can certainly provide you. You wanted to know how much the 42 homes had decreased carbon in Medway. I'll get that figure for you. You're saying that's 0.04% of properties in Medway. I mentioned an earlier question about how, you may not have been here, but I was talking about this issue then, and I consider the people who've taken up this scheme, the Solar Together team, as pioneers. I think they're very brave. I think that it's a challenge on a household level to say, right, we're going to go down this route, put solar panels on my roof, and it's worked for those 42. Their bills are considerably less now than they were before they installed them, and they are contributing in some small way, household by household, towards the decarbonation target of 2050. So that we're on that journey. It's going to take time. I'll be honest with you, it's not going to be easy, but you know, the passion that so many of us now have to get there is what's driving this forward. And on a larger scale, I think I mentioned that as well, places like Mid-Kent College, who are looking to be decarbonised by 2025, they've invested a huge amount into their colleges, their 2 campuses in Medway and Maidstone into this. So they're doing an awful lot. And our own refit programme within our own properties that Medway Council owns, and we're buying more properties for families in Medway that are in need of housing. We've got a really good, almost a benchmark process of refit within our own properties to go down that route and contribute to that figure. And I know that people like the social housing providers, MHS, and 1 or 2 others are very keen to follow and work with us on decarbonising their own properties as well. So there is a movement towards that now, but it's going to take time, it's about coordinated effort, and it's about investment. And that this struggling with the financial crisis that we've been in for the last year and a half since a certain government, Prime Minister decided to trash the economy, we're struggling to recover from that, as you know. So, but getting investment in for that sort of thing is something we're working for. I'll have to get you some figures though, and certainly on the levels of CO2 measurements, I just don't have that to hand, so apologies for that. As far as the buses are concerned, again, I mentioned this before about the fact that the previous administration did not think really public transport was a particularly important issue. I think it's key to the future of Medway's community. This is the sort of 3 pillars of sustainable development are the environment, obviously, the community and the economy. And if we're going to get that right and have a sustainable community for the whole of Medway going forward, we need to get that right. And public transport to get workers in and out of work efficiently and well and at a reasonable price with a quality of service, that's what buses are all about. And at the moment, they're not delivering that. I'll be honest with you, but we are meeting with the bus companies. We've met with them several times now in the last few months, and I've got a bus workshop coming up. Sounds like a sort of nerd's paradise, which I kind of fit into quite neatly. But we've got a bus workshop coming up this month to talk to them further about how they can deliver the 3 things that we want. We want quality of service, we want affordability, and we want to look at their timetabling and their routes that they're operating. So that's the kind of approach we've got on buses. On the RCV question, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a real problem. It's a really difficult, complex issue around how you introduce electric vehicles into a waste collection fleet. And we're working together to put together a waste strategy to deliver that. Westminster have a complete electric fleet. It was a real struggle for them, and it cost a lot of money, but they bit the bullet and they went for it. The problem with electric vehicles of that size, and the same applies to buses and lorries generally, is the batteries are very, very heavy. and they're very, very expensive. And often the batteries are very heavy, very expensive, and often the battery sourcing and the materials are sometimes not very sustainable because of the complex metals that are involved in these kind of batteries and stuff like that. So there is a question around whether electric for very large vehicles is the right route. And a lot of the experts that we're talking to now, and we're sort of reading up, and I do read a lot about this, are saying that hydrogen is probably the better fuel. The problem with hydrogen is that we don't have enough of it. I know that France is manufacturing a lot of hydrogen for their vehicle fleets, and they won't sell it to us. I think there's a European Union issue involved there somewhere along the line, but there you go. So we need to be manufacturing our own hydrogen, and certainly there's some projects. There's one project up in Liverpool, which I've just been reading about, where they're looking at manufacturing hydrogen up. I'm trying to remember exactly which, but it's in Liverpool anyway. But the problem over hydrogen manufacture is the different colours of hydrogen. So you've got your grey, your blue, and your green hydrogen. The green hydrogen is manufactured from seawater. And all that's given off is oxygen, and that's the ideal one that you want to do. The other hydrogens are manufactured from fossil fuels. And obviously you then got to do what you do with the carbon that's left over. You've got to try and get that back in the ground. That sequestration process of getting it back in the ground is a problem. So looking at how we decarbonise our waste fleet, that's part of our waste strategy. The purchase of the vehicles, I agree with you. I think it's a shame that we couldn't start buying electric first straight away. But a question right at the start was about whether we have the right depot. We don't have that, so we need to move from Pier Road and find a new depot where the electric supplies are in place. And we could certainly have our street cleansing vehicles could be electric as we go forward, as we replace those as part of the strategy going forward. If we can provide them with the power source, then we can make those electric, the smaller vehicles. And I think the other problem with the RCVs, and this goes back to when they were purchased originally, I think it was about 10 or 12 years ago, is that they were all bought at the same time. And that's a nightmare. Any waste management fleet management, you would never buy all your vehicles in one go because they're all worn out at the same time. It's costing us 30 grand a month to keep them on the road. So we're going through that process of a gradual purchase over a period of time, at the same time maintaining the quality and the level of service we now have, which we inherited from the previous administration. There's no doubt that the collection service is very good. We want to maintain that. And in order to do that and decarbonise at the same time means that we have to stagger the purchase of the vehicles over a period of time. And that's complicated and difficult. But we've got a plan. I've got spreadsheets on it, and I've seen the programmes of it and everything else, which I love as well. So yeah, we're on that journey. So that's the RCV issue. Is that all your questions? I think that is. Oh, the green bus stops. Yeah, again, that was about a one-off grant. And we're looking for a place where we could install a green-topped bus shelter, and it seemed Inchel was a good place to start. Ideally, we'd love to do more. They do make a contribution to helping clean the air, the biodiversity element of it. They're attractive as well. They've got sort of plants growing on them and stuff like that. So definitely, you'd love to do more. But it's about money. We don't have that kind of cash hanging around. There was a grant for that, and I think I mentioned that it'd be nice if we get some sponsorship for those, a bit like the high street flower baskets are looked after by local firms and stuff like that. It'd be nice if we could do something similar along those lines.
How much did it cost?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'll have to give you an answer to that.
Thank you for your question. Thanks for answering, Councillor Curry. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Curry, for I think you may have answered some of them. I'll just reinforce a couple of things just because I know you're passionate about them. I think you are aware there's members around this table that are on the active travel and air quality task group. We had our first meeting yesterday. I think one of the issues, I suppose, around the bus companies is you are right, bus companies are quite interested to come around the table when there's something in it for them. But they do have to give back. So, you know, for example, if we want the stuff that Councillor Hackworth was saying, you know, if there was a bus that was running up here from everywhere where we live, then we'd be jumping on it, but there isn't. And there isn't buses going up here, especially when we leave here of a meeting at 1 o'clock in the morning, there isn't. So, you know, but for example, you've got over Peninsula, etc., you know, we were talking about round-robin buses or just you know, an electric bus that goes around and pick up the community. Sometimes it's about those bus companies still investing in our communities. And I know you've done some immense work on that and you have got a good relationship with most of the companies, but then they need to go a bit more. And I know you'll be coming to that evidence giving with the bus companies, but we need to be doing something on that. We need to be, you know, it's not always about us giving them a carrot, it's about them also giving us something back as well, I feel. But I am quite, confident that we are going in the right direction at last with the bus companies. But I suppose my question for you is around the air quality as well. You know, the climate agenda is really important. And we've got our air quality in 3 significant areas checking our air quality. You know, it's a challenge. Our air quality is a challenge. And I don't think there's any magic wand to be able to resolve that. But I suppose I'm just looking for you as the Cabinet member to say we'll be putting as much as we can behind any recommendations that come out of the task group, as long as it doesn't cost thousands of pounds. But we will be, you know, sometimes it's just about joined up thinking with industry, with the council, with everybody in our community, how we all join up. So we'd be interested to get you around that table. The other thing, I suppose, is that there's an issue around charging points, isn't there? We want to go electric, but we've got, as you know, Councillor Curry, and again, you've helped our resident there quite a bit. I know you're still doing some more. We've got conservation areas that can't have charging points or can't have things outside their house. We're going to need to do something about that, aren't we, to make a difference in our community, because to encourage people to go down that road, we do need more charging points. We need to be able to pull it outside our houses. We've got streets where it's front door to road. How is that going to work? So we need to just, I suppose it'd be really interesting. I know I'm not going to say you're a nerd, Councillor Curry. I don't want to get in trouble, but I know you have looked at this for a long time about how this could how you've mapped this out across the towns, which it wouldn't normally interest me, but that sort of thing, when you mentioned it to me, did, because it's about how it would actually work. And so anything on that, I'd be really interested in, about us, whether it's with planning or whether it's with you, how we overcome that issue around ensuring we can get charging points. Just a couple of things that I suppose it is about the street scene as well. What Councillor Llewellyn Prenter was saying. I know Councillor Prenter and Councillor Khan and I are doing something with the community in the high street and with the businesses, because it isn't just, you've got a really good street scene team, they do their best to keep the area clean, but it isn't just their community, is it? It's about all of us. You know, the first thing, I'm sure members around this table will agree, we will always get a photo or an email or something on Facebook showing us how dirty the high street is. One bit that's always missing in that is who's dropped the paper, who's dropped that rubbish, and who's dumped it there. And I think it's about that ownership, what Councillor Llewellyn Prenter was saying. It's about people taking ownership for their community and us helping that. So us helping that on the high streets, and we're going to go out and collect, and not just for a photo, we're going to go out on a monthly basis, which I know you'll love from your idea, but it'd be really good to see some of that education as was mentioned earlier. My last point is could you please take my thanks back to your climate team? Every single thing with my other hat in my job, everywhere I go, I see your brilliant climate team giving out the recycling bags, giving out everything and that was something we never used to see. And I know it's been picked up by partners, I know it's been picked up by residents that when they go to an event and they can pick up these recycling bags, etc. And I don't mean the ones that we've had a slight issue with just because of the Christmas thing. I'm talking about the proper blue and the white bags. They are excellent. So I just wanted to pass that back. And I learnt so much in 20 minutes discussion with them about my recycling. And I'm not ashamed to say, 20 minutes of a quick chat with them, I learnt so much about how I should recycle better. And I think that's something that we should be pushing out on our communications, a video on somewhere. We should be pushing that out to charities and organisations and residents to actually tell them what you can and can't recycle, because sometimes it is just about that basic education. So it's just a real thanks at the end for that, and thank you for investing in that team, because they are immense. They're brilliant. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Den. I'll start with the bus companies. We've been talking a lot about buses, if you like, and needing to do more. I'll certainly take back the message to them about their responsibility that you say. I think you're right. I think if they're going to be part of our, they are part of the thing going forward, and it's a really good business opportunity for them, and they should be investing better. And I think we've seen that in other parts of the country where they have done that, but they haven't done it here in Medway, and that's part of the argument. So I'll certainly take that back, and we've got the workshop coming up at the end of the month, and I'll take that message to them there. Charging points, where to begin? I mean, it's a real challenge. I mean, if you look at just about conservation areas, if you've got something that's listed or in the conservation area and you're not allowed to put a charger outside, then so that means we've got to change the rules. Basically, that's what I feel. Some of that can come through the local plan. Part of our local plan process, if you like, is talking to government, talking to DLUC. About the rules around planning and saying, look, this isn't working. And I'm sure they're getting the same message from every local authority in the country that they need to change that, because it's about sustainable development, and I'll mention more about that in a second. And if we're going to be sustainable, some things are going to have to give. And whether you've got a little plug arrangement on the outside of a nice building, honestly, it's more important that we save the planet. So that's where I come from on that one. So certainly that's part of the thinking. But I think there is a wider issue around charging, and I've had a lot of residents actually talk to me in the last few months about this and how we deliver charging across Medway for household electric cars. A lot of people are very keen to have one, and I'm the same, but I've got nowhere to charge. I live on a main road and I can't park outside. It's double yellow outside my house. So what do I do? And I'm in that kind of catch-22 situation where I want to do it, but I can't. And I think that's the kind of situation a lot of people are in. It's even more complex if you live in an old Victorian terrace. When there's even enough room to put all the cars, never mind how do you charge them, and do you have electric charging from lampposts? Well, the power source in those lampposts isn't high enough, so you'd have to change the whole network. It's almost a bit like if you remember the cable TV scenario years ago when they rolled out the whole cable television network and dug up every street in the country. Well, are we looking at something like that? And I think the answer is probably a really kind of complex project management approach where you look at it almost street by street about how you can deliver the charging to a little part of the community. And sometimes there might be a public car park nearby where people can do a shared bit and they can book their slot and charge up every week and stuff like that. Working with the oil and gas companies, I hate to say it, but they are the problem, but they are also part of the solution. And a lot of companies are putting charging into the garages where you can go and charge up. So that is another part of it. So I think it's going to be a complex mixture of everything. But I think one of the key bits, and this is where I know we're trying to do this at Gun Wharf, is that a lot of people are driving to work. And if you can charge at work, then that kind of solves a lot of people's problems. And I know that our new director of place, who's started just at the end of last year, October I think it was, he drives with an electric car to work every day. So it's possible that we could, and I think there's more sat in front of us as well. So to have that on board, and that message going out to everybody that we can do this, but it's complex and there's not one kind of overall solution to charging. The street scene thing is hugely important, and you mentioned that in a number of different ways. It goes back to what I think of as a sustainable development. It's about community, it's about the environment, it's about the economy. All three of those play out in our high streets. If we've got really nice high streets, then it brings people in, it makes the economy better, and it also makes the environment better because it's cleaner and greener and that sort of thing. I know that the plans for the high street where we're putting changes to Debenhams is going in, and the new healthy living centre in the Pentagon, that will incorporate the street outside as well and make improvements there. You're right, Gillingham's needs a lot more investment in that area, and that's something that I know that all of you in Gillingham are all over that one. And the Town Centre Board, I think, is meeting early next week, and we'll be talking about Gillingham there as well. So that is happening, but it's difficult to do, and it's about engaging. You cannot, as I said right at the start, Medway Council can't solve the problems. This has to be a whole community approach, and I think we're getting it. Now we're starting to build that engagement as much as we can. And just while we're talking about that, I mean, again, another passion of mine is trees. and how important trees are. We're rewriting the council's tree policy at the moment. It will be much more inclusive of engaging with everybody to plant as many trees. The urban areas in Medway have about 13 or 10, between 10 and 13% tree cover. We should be more up near 30%, to be honest, for a whole host of reasons to do with, obviously, biodiversity. It helps with the wildlife, but it's also about cooling in the town centres. We were hitting 40-degree temperatures a couple of years ago in Medway. That's going to happen more and more frequently, and trees really do make a difference in cooling our town centres, and there's a health issue in there. They help with the air pollution. I was going to just touch on that in a moment, if I can, as well, in terms of helping to soak up some of the particulate pollution that's inevitably in our air. And I think also in relation to the actual feel of the place. Trees are a really good thing to have in your high streets and in your town centres and stuff. So there's a whole host of reasons why the street scene, the public realm, which is what I like to think of it, is that area where people gather, needs to be really nice, and it needs to be litter-free, like you say as well. So I think that one. I'll just touch on the issue around air pollution that you raised. We've got 4 what are called air quality management areas in Medway. We should have none. As simple as that. That would be the ideal target. We talked about target with Gary a minute ago about what is our target. Well, the target on air pollution is to have no air quality management areas in Medway. That would be lovely. How we get there is a real challenge. That's about reducing car pollution for certain, with certainly sort of generally reducing congestion, lowering that, and how we go about doing that. I'll touch on that in a moment. But it's also about household pollution. It goes back to the fact that I think something like 20+% of air pollution comes out of our household boilers. And if we can change that to solar panels and air source heat pumps and ground source, whatever it is, we get rid of that carbon-based fuel from our houses. That's a big contribution as well. Again, promoting that. This is never going to be easy. It won't happen tomorrow. It's going to happen over the next 10 years or more, and the 2050 target is kind of where we're going. But that's where we've got to go with it. And I think in terms of the actual pollution itself and the health issue, a really good example is and it's where the trees come in particularly, is particulates. If you think of the size of a particle coming out of a diesel engine at 2.5 microns, that PM 2.5 that you hear talked about, those particles can get into your lungs and cause problems for breathing, particularly for children and other vulnerable people. If it's a 0.1 micron particle, it can get through your lungs and into your bloodstream and cause problems in your body. I mean, that's the kind of problems we're talking about associated with air pollution. So we shouldn't have air quality management areas in Medway for that reason. Certainly outside our schools, where children are going in literally every day and coming out every day, and there's vehicles parked up outside there with their engines running. You know, I know that happens across Medway in a lot of schools. And I think that we need to just kind of, because it's affecting health, and that's where the health agenda is so important. And I'm on the Health and Wellbeing Board as well for that reason, to bring that element of air pollution into it. So. And I'll take the thanks back to the team. They are amazing. Can I just mention that the two key teams, well, not two key, there's quite a lot of staff involved. The Environment Engagement team, and they've got their, just at the end of last year, we put the small electrical recycling boxes in the library, which are being used, and I'll promote that again. If you've got any small electricals, take it to your local library to recycle it if you're getting rid of it. And then there's the climate change team who produce the plans as well, and they're doing a fantastic job behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer there, Councillor Corrie. Councillor Croser.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Simon, for your report. And Simon, I think you're the right man for the job, doing a great job. Can I just reiterate what John was saying, that the people that live around Finsbury Hill knew nothing about the interventions and the disruption that are going to take place there. And for them, it's a very serious issue. For the people of the peninsula, as you know, the A228 is the only single road into Strood. It's the main road that we use. Residents from Gillingham use the A289. It's a strategic route for us, and any disruption along that route is critical. And it will cause us a lot of problems. We've got people go to work in Medway, even the disruption going to Gravesend and beyond and to London. We've got kids that are going to take examinations in Rochester that live on the peninsula in these coming months, their GCSEs, they're going to be late for their exams. So it's a really serious problem for us. And I think there's a major lesson to be learned here. But before I say that, I'm pleased to see, I've read some of your letter that you've written back to Kelly. I'm really pleased of some of the interventions you've mentioned so far about opening Canal Road and trying to reduce it to 15 weeks and talking to developers and things like that. But I think there's a lesson to be learnt here that we don't tell, whatever side it is, and I don't think this is a Labour Conservative issue. We don't tell people when there's going to be disruption. We've just had a situation on the top of Forums Hill that's been months in the making. It should have been a very short job. The aggravation that my residents have had to endure on top of Forums Hill is incredible. And the last bit they did up there, putting the anti-skid on, never give any indication that they were going to do it at night from 8 o'clock, disruption all through the night. I asked officers whether they should. Why haven't they written? And they said, well, we don't write normally to tell people. That is wrong, and I think officers accept that now. So we should be telling people when there's going to be disruption. We all understand we need a school, and those services need to go in, but it needs to be done with a minimal disruption. Can I echo what Dan said about the buses? I think it's crazy that we've got Euro 3, 4, or whatever it is. We should have the latest bus service here. We should be looking at routes, particularly again off of the peninsula. We come from the peninsula to Stroud, Chatham, and Rochester. We need to go through all of the 3 or 4 towns that we've got in Medway to get to Chatham. Why can't we have a circular route round the town? So we use so the buses go both ways through the tunnel to Chatham. I think it's a great idea to perhaps have a hub at Stroud Station. Just one other thing, Simon. The other thing that the people that don't live in Medway, one of the first things they see when they come down from London, you talked about coming down on the train to Stroud and then going out to All Hallows. A lot of people drive as well. They drive down the A2 and they drive down the A289. And if you drive down that 289 today, it is disgusting. The litter that is down the A289. I know it gets picked every now and again, and my residents normally complain just before it gets picked, and it would seem that I've got some magic touch with officers that I can get it done, but I know there's a schedule for that. Can somebody look at that schedule? Because I don't think it's getting enough. If you look at the whole of that 289 right the way round to the roundabout up by Tesco's, I don't think you get the disruption south of the river that we do. You certainly don't get the rubbish that we get. There must be, it's lorry rubbish, I think, predominantly. But it so lets Medway down when you drive into it. And I feel so ashamed when I drive up and down there. And it's not just us. The top of the A289 is controlled by Kent, as you know. And I've spoken to Kent last time that it happened. And, I think that should really be a liaison with Kent to do that. I think that's it. Oh no, the other thing I might say that with the A289, I know that you're doing this cycleway. Route 9 is specifically the extension to the Four Elms Hill cycle lane, and it's going to stop at Station Road. That is going to go up the side of the 289 across Berwick Way, past the school, quite rightly, but then on Finsbury Hill, where the pathway is narrow. That is another massive piece of disruption in the making there, and I think you ought to look at the route of the A289. I know we've got footpaths that run across the Hogmarsh Valley there. Perhaps we could utilise, or the Army Road, so it goes through Upner, and then up the old Upner Road back out by Ampersand House and stuff like that. I think that really needs looking at, because I think to put children and cyclists alongside that one road that's a 70 mile an hour. I think it's the only road in Medway that's got 70 mile an hour. We've got a cycle lane right next to it. Is very important. But I'm pleased with what you're doing so far. You're doing a great job, Simon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry. Is that better? Yeah, thank you. A couple of things about the Four Elms Hill issue. I agree. I mean, I think I'll get onto the comms bit in a moment, if I may. But just talking about the one issue was around the local farmer who has access for all his farm vehicles off the the lay-by there, he wanted to make sure that the changes weren't going to stop his vehicles getting in and out. So I think there's some work going on there to resolve that issue on the left-hand side as you go up.
Yeah, I don't think that isn't a major disruption.
Oh, okay, I've had some
It
emails
was
about that.
the disruption that was the cycleway, and it was.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you leave home, you don't realise until you get onto that A228. Once you're on the A228, you can't just take a circular route anywhere else. You're there until it's finished.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But I take on board the point about I just mentioned about the cycleways and such like. We've just gone out this week on our local cycling and walking improvement plan consultation. Any views, anybody, please put your views in. Let us know what you think. It's all online, it's on there, and it'll get incorporated and taken in. And I think in that respect as well, I've mentioned a few times about the bus companies and meeting with them. I agree with you on the Euro 6 issue and the Euro 3 to 5 issue, which is just not fair on the residents in Medway to have polluting buses like that here. I think they should get rid of them, to be honest, but completely. But we are where we are with that. But we're certainly raising that with them. But again, if there's any routes that you think in your wards need to be changed, then let us know, because we're looking at every route for buses in Medway. So please let us know. Certainly the peninsula route's a big factor in there as well. And a circular route that took you around all Medway will be quite a useful input. I know that's being looked at. So the answer to that part of your question is through that local cycling and walking network improvement plan. We'll certainly be doing some of that work and the work we're doing with the bus companies. Just going back to your comms, I think you're right. I mean, I can't deny that it's been problematic. This last sort of how many months it is we've been since last May. Obviously, we're dealing with a programme of works that was in place before we took over. Looking at that programme going forward, it'll be different. It's about project management and how things are done. We don't have a great deal of control over the companies that do the work, particularly when it's the gas companies and the water companies. They come in and they do it. I know there was an issue in where they announced they were going to do some works. They told Arriva, who cancelled all the buses through the middle of and then they didn't turn up on the day. There was no buses and no roadworks, and it was all very confusing for a few days around that. So getting that comms right is really, really important. I agree with that. As far as the situation on Finsbury Hill, I think I covered a lot of that, and as you say, I've written back to Kelly Tolhurst expressing our concerns and hoping that she'll work with us rather than against us in lobbying the Department for Transport for a better approach to it. But
unfortunately, Simon, you're in control, so
I agree.
That goes with the job, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's about influence, about funding more than anything else, and how quickly the work gets done by the Department for Education. I think that's part of the key thing. But you're right, it is a problem, and I'm not going to deny it's going to be disruptive. But we're stuck with it. We say having control. We don't have control over that. So we just have to do the best we can. And we'll literally. It says week. I think we might be meeting weekly. It'll probably be more frequently than that when it actually starts. We'll be meeting with them very often to get that through as quickly as possible. You talked about the litter issue. I know I've had some residents offering to volunteer to go and litter pick the A289, which they can't do. I do urge people not to go out with your sacks and your sticks on the A289 because of the horrendous health and safety issue around that. I've seen it myself, and I think there's the junction as you come over, I think it's junction 2 on the A2, M2, no, just coming up there, down near Cuxton, at that point there, it's really bad there as well. So there are some serious places. And I think it's the lorries. I think you're right. A lot of it is flying off the back of them, so we need to talk to the companies about that.
Can I just say that when I took it up last year, so December, just after the by-election, there is some connection with the officers between Kent and Medway in that area, if that could be followed up, because again, I think they've got the same problem we've got.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it needs to be followed up. So that's something that will happen. Yeah, I think have I covered your points? Liaison with Kent. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie, and thank you for your question, Councillor Croser. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Curry, for the report. I'm glad that you've highlighted the 3 areas that I want to ask questions about. The first one's around the frontline services delivery and I'm particularly interested in the Norse contract or non-contract. If you can tell us what you can tell us about the progress being made to regularise that. That's number one. And is there hope that actually we will get the work done that we're being promised, particularly where Norse have promised to do work within green spaces and sometimes have been paid by councillors out of ward improvement funds for things that haven't happened? Because at the moment, I can't find out who to trust or who to listen to on that one. So thank you if you can take that forward. I'm not expecting a complete answer on that one. The local plan, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Actually, one of your fellow board members on the Lower Medway IDB is a developer who's interested in making sure that we can introduce more SUDs. Now, I'm not really correct maybe in my words about this, but this is sustainable drainage units within housing estates. And he's one of the few developers that wants to know if he can work with the council on having these in areas where they abut the street scene, so that if on the private land in the winter and there's too much runoff, that they'll take the water. But in the summer, they turn into quite nice grassy things. I don't understand the technicalities around that, but I would like that put on the climate agenda thing. And I'm really, really happy to see that despite the withdrawal of the £170 million, which is totally out of everybody in this room's control, has happened, that people are still talking the good points around what might have come in that plan. And thank you for that. Thank you for Councillor Crozier's statement that you're the right guy for the job. What I would say about the litter, and you'll remember this from when you were an officer too, one of our chief executives always maintained that we really need to keep on top of the litter, particularly on the entrances and the main roads into the towns. And I will second what Councillor Crozier is saying around that we need to present the best possible view of that. Obviously, the further in we get, we've got different challenges, but that's first impressions. The climate action stuff around buses, again, I suppose if we had had the infrastructure grant, we might have been able to move faster on that. But I am very heartened to hear that, particularly for for getting the new vehicles and stuff with Norse, that we will have our vehicles not as polluting as some others. To talk about being completely electric is not necessarily practical if you think about the geography and where some of them have to go. But the idea of a hub at Strood for buses does seem practical. But I would like, if you're looking at other options around the bin lorries and stuff like that, Greenwich used to be a great leader in that sort of advanced thinking. I mean, they were one of the first London boroughs to have used biodiesel, and they worked with Mercedes to develop some of those engines. So just having a climate action group, I think, is going to give us the opportunity for several brains around the one table. So, and I'd like to also talk about the small items recycling. I had the pleasure of being in the hub at Twiddle on the day that the first one was fitted, and a lady came in within 3 minutes of it actually being put there, asking the very question of where could she do this. And she went home straight away to get an item to put in it. The units in some areas now aren't big enough, so it's very good. And my thanks to the team on that as well, please.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Corrie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think probably working a bit back, just picking up that point you're saying about the litter issue, and picking up again what George was saying. You're right. I mean, it's about a conversation between Kent and Medway, which we need to do about how we clear out what's there. But it's also talking to the lorry companies that are using those routes on a regular basis and why they haven't got the stuff secured properly in the backs and stuff like that. So there's a sort of conversations to be had around that, which I'll pick up and take forward as an action from tonight's meeting. I think the other thing, let's just running backwards, in terms of, you mentioned about RCVs and how it's been done, I'm really keen on best practice in that respect and how other areas have done this before us. We are way behind in Medway on a lot of the work that I've been outlining tonight in my report and that we've been picking up on. We are years behind other authorities. If you go to Bristol or Leeds or Birmingham, they are very far ahead in what they're doing, places in London as well, obviously. So there is a lot of best practice out there that we can pick up on, and we are picking up on. We're all the time, the staff involved in this are pinging sort of little reports or whatever to each other about what they've seen or what they've read about or the latest that's come out. So we're picking up on best practice as much as we can. And we are networked into a much wider local authority schemes across the southeast as well. So there is a lesson to be learned from others in that respect. The Strood Hub idea for that, I've had that in my head probably for the last 20 years, and now that we're here in authority, it's time to try and take that forward. It is a local plan issue. We'll have to put it in there if it's going to fit and it'll make it work. So that'll certainly be something that's being discussed within the local plans team. Just to let members know, we've got, obviously the local plan team have got their timetable that they're working for that will be published in March. And that will come out then as to how that timetable works out. And we've got 4 members within our group who are part of actual members who are working together with the local plan officers to get this through, because it is such an important part of our delivery in the next few years, and we're hoping to have the plan published at some point in the next couple of years. So, and that timetable will be coming out in March. So there's quite a lot of work done, and the great response we had on our Regulation 18 consultation last October, where we had thousands of people clicking on the website, which is really encouraging, that we're trying to make it as public and as engagement as possible on the local plan. And I think there was the idea you mentioned in the local, well, I'm on the local plan, about IDBs and the development and how we develop proper sustainable urban drainage systems as SUDs. You're absolutely right. There are lots of quite good techniques now where you can control drainage much better using nature-based solutions, which is what this is about, where you can put in the right kind of area within a street scene where the water will soak through quite quickly, and then when it's drier, actually you can have a couple of trees in there and stuff like that. The use of trees is really important. A good example, which impacts quite significantly on my own ward, I get a lot of flooding around Nelson Terrace every year and stuff like that. The problem actually lies at the top end of the Capstan Valley. All the trees that used to be there are gone. There were ponds down Capstan Valley 100 years ago, which have all disappeared now. There's even new housing development going in on East Hill, which is a bit scary. That's 800 homes are going to go in there. And all that change in the landscape at the top end of Capstan Valley results in flooding down in Luton because the water pours through, nothing to hold it back, and the Victorian drainage in the centre of Luton can't cope, and it spills up into people's homes. That's the kind of scale of the problem we're dealing with, and other parts of Gillingham and other parts of Medway have similar problems. Sorry, come in.
There was some work done with council officers, and when Priscilla was one of the council officers, was being done with Southern Water on trying to slow some of the water that was coming down into your ward, actually. That obviously was a good story being talked up by our colleagues in the water industry, but there is a partial solution which they're not willing to fund on that one.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. I think it's a mixture of the two, isn't it? It's a mixture of engineered solutions where you have to replace drains and redesign your new housing estates to make the water either held back away from them or flow through more efficiently. And then there's also the nature-based solutions, the use of trees, use of grassed areas and meadows and stuff to soak up the water. I mean, a floodplain, which is down in the valley of Medway, is a floodplain. It's called that for a reason, because it floods. I mean, it has done for thousands of years. And to build houses on a floodplain, you've got to build in a solution to stop your houses flooding. As simple as that. So there is that's certainly something that's in there as part of the local plan process as well. You talked about the Norse contract and the delivery of frontline services. Again, I think I mentioned at the start, the issue around the joint venture with Norse is making it a complicated process, and we are in early stages of discussion about how we make that more of a contract client-based relationship. And in the middle of that is about monitoring and how we do that. At the moment, we do not have sufficient level of monitoring of a lot of our contract work because we don't have the staff. It's as simple as that. We've been through this austerity process since 2010, and in austerity means cutting staff on a year-by-year basis in local authorities. It means that we are pared to the bone in terms of officers available to monitor contract work, and that is always going to be a problem until we change that austerity regime. As simple as that. But there you go, that's politics for you. So there is an issue around how we monitor, which is part of the discussions going forward. On the other one, you mentioned about the projects that were under HIF, under the Housing Infrastructure Fund, that we want to try and take forward and the ideas behind them. I just wanted to mention in that respect 3 projects in particular, if I can, Chair. One is the wetland site near Kings North, which has got planning permission. That was a HIF project, and obviously that can't happen now because the funding is not available, but we've still got planning permission for that, and it'd be lovely to take it forward. And that's a habitat restoration program, creation of new wetland habitat for birds and other biodiversity. There's the Cockenwood Community Woodland Project. Again, it's land not in our ownership, but we had the landowners agreement that we could open it up for community use. That was going to be paid for by HIF and can't happen. But I've spoken with the landowners and they're still keen to see it happen. So that's still part of the agenda, and that'll be on the outskirts of Who. So it's a really good project. We've got to find the funding for it. And the third one is the Deangate Golf Course site, where we've got now a really good plan drawn up by officers to turn that into a country park style location. There's buildings on site for a possible visitor centre, obviously the bowling club's there and things like that. So there's a really brilliant facility for the public there, including a kind of open space provision as well. Again, finding the funding for that is a challenge. It'll have to be some sort of collaborative work, maybe with the private sector contributing as well and government grants. But the planning permission for that is going in, and we'll get planning applications sorted as quickly as possible for that. I think it's coming up quite soon. I'm looking at Stephen. He knows the agendas better than I do, but it's coming up soon to get the permission in place for that, so that's securing that site as a countryside site for the local community. So there are projects that we'd love to be doing. The money's gone. We'll keep the projects live, and we'll make sure that we can somehow deliver them if we can find the funding. Have I covered all your points? Have I missed anything off?
No, thank you, Councillor Curry. That's grand. Maybe we'll get some of the handouts that Councillor Hackwell said the government was giving out the other night at business support.
Thank you, Councillor Brown and Councillor Corrie for your answer. Councillor Bowen.
Hi. These businesses that want buses run, has any chat been had about getting them to chip in for this, or?
So you mean the bus companies themselves chipping in?
No, the businesses like the holiday place.
Oh.
Yeah. Is that an option, or?
I think the answer is yes. I think one of the things that we've been certainly looking at the businesses on Kings North. We've had a couple of meetings with them now where we've asked some of the key businesses to come together and talk to us about what their workforces require in terms of getting in and out to work every day. And obviously their shift patterns are really complicated, and how you get 2 different companies to have the same shift pattern, it's not possible, but you can over the course of a sort of a month, work out when would be good to have the right buses in place for them. And then you talk to the bus companies about how you deliver that for their workers. And the companies are quite happy to help with the subsidy on that. So yeah, they're up for help with that. And certainly I wouldn't be surprised if, I haven't spoken to Haven about subsidies, so I don't know if they would or not, but I think I mean, it'd be good thing if they did. Something perhaps I shouldn't talk about yet because I haven't spoken to them about it. But certainly it'd be nice if we could get that collaboration between the bus companies, the council, and the local businesses working together. So yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie, and thanks for your question. I've got one more question, then I will come in myself. Councillor Hubbard.
You were just picking up about comms and poor comms. One of the things that on the Medway, the council's Medway website, is that lots of things are hidden, right? So it's a tool I use. It's called One Network. It's actually on the council's website. If you go under parking, roads and travel, and you go down to roads, and you go into road works, it comes up with an access to One Network. I look at that regularly to see what, and that is all the utilities in the council, putting all the works which are going to be planned for 6 months in advance, a year in advance, and they put that on that one database. And there's a national database, but I specifically look about in my ward. And I think that comms needs to go out to councillors. I just talked to Dan, he didn't know anything about it. I talked to Pauline the other day, and she didn't know about it. But it's the one bit I always look at, because it's one thing, how did I know about the potential roadworks? Well, apart from the fact I argued against it from 2019, I went on One Network, and it's been there. And I can go on it now, I can see what it's in the next 3 months, what's next for the next 12 months. And it's not a good at all. And I'm quite sure that you will be discussing the opportunities to divert along Canal Road with the ward councillor. That'd be me. But one thing about it, I don't mind it being a temporary measure, but not a measure that's going to be there for all times. I know the councillors for Finsbury Strood Rural would like to see it open all the time, but the residents of my ward would not like that at all. And apart from that, it doesn't really address the situation, because you come down Canal Road and smack into a junction that can't cope, getting traffic out onto the A2. Then you have to you've got to look at traffic lights there if you're going to get stuff coming down Canal Road. So, yeah, can I suggest that you go back to comms and tell councillors where to look to get day-to-day information, and let alone members of the public.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. Thank you. Councillor Corrie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stephen. Obviously, comms is not within my portfolio, but I'll certainly take that message back. I think it probably lies within Councillor Van Dijk's area, but I'll talk to the team about that. Certainly pick up what is within my area is how the teams that I have within my portfolio do their comms. And I picked up a number of members tonight saying we could do it better. And I accept that, and we will do it better. So that's certainly something to take away. So I appreciate that point from there. And I'll speak to colleagues about how we can get... I mean, I don't want to criticise, but the website is very clunky for Medway Council. It has been for many, many years. But and I'm sure a lot of people have seen that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie. Just one for me, coming down to 4.4, the Council's Sustainable Transport Activities. Now, cargo ships are known to be relatively low carbon emissions per ton mile in comparison to trucks or other mode of transport. Right next door, Chatham docks, we have 600,000 tons of cargo coming in every year. I just wonder what consideration has been given to the impact that the potential closure of that dock will have on CO2 emission, and what's the plan to combat that, to mitigate against that, if that was what was to happen.
Sorry, Chair, you say about what's coming into Chatham docks?
600 tons of cargo come into that dock per year. It is submitted, cargo. Yeah, 170 vessels.
Oh, right. In terms of
come.
the ship movements in and out.
Yeah, ship
right.
movement.
Okay.
But I mean, yeah, so the question is to do with, I mean, our river strategy, we'll name after a river. And I just want to understand what consideration has been given to sustainable logistic movement.
Again, the river strategy has been paused for quite a long time, the last couple of years. We brought it back up to speed. It's on its way. One of the issues that's, I'll be honest, without getting into the politics of it all, was the future of the docks and what was being done there. And obviously how we deal with that has still not been resolved. About what will happen with Chatham docks. That's still part of the discussions going forward, and it will be in the local plan as well, so it's being dealt with. So I think in terms of how we deal with the amount of carbon coming in by ship, is that where you are with the question?
That's right, yeah.
My own view is that actually it's a lot, but actually it's better than the lorry movements on land. If you add up how much lorry movements, for a good example would be if there's transport between Chatham docks and say Kingsnorth. I know that some of the work done at Chatham docks it goes over to Kingsnorth. If that could be done on the river, that'd be fantastic. But there is no jetty at Kingsnorth, so you can't have ships going into Kingsnorth until we get a jetty sorted out. We've spoken to the companies out there; they would love to have a jetty, but the cost is humongous. So it's how you manage your river traffic, I think, lies at the heart of that. And the other project, which you may or may not have heard about, is about our what we're calling benevolent use of drainage and dredgings off the estuary. So where you have to dig out channels for the ships to move in and out, and the mud of the estuary, what do you do with that mud? Well, you can actually replace it quite nearby and start creating new salt marsh. And salt marsh is one of the best areas to sequester carbon. So you can start, and we've started a project there. We've got a couple of people working on it, and there's a group that's come together, which actually involves the previous leader of the council. He's on that group as well. And we're looking at how we can sustainably use the dredgings coming out of the river channels that are cleared for shipping and sequester the carbon by creating new salt marsh areas. So it's in the thinking. It's not perfect, but it's certainly there as part of the river strategy. Hopefully that covers.
No, thank you. Yes, I mean, 90% of the raw material coming into the docks come by ship, as cargo.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think if we could do more in some respects, but perhaps not into Chatham docks, but into other parts of the river as well, utilising it, that would certainly, reducing the lorry movements is no bad thing. But that's just my personal view on that one. I don't have any further information, I'm afraid, on that question. I don't.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie. Thank you, members. We have no other questions, but thanks for attending and taking the time to answer our question, Councillor Corrie. That brings us on to agenda. Sorry, I'll ask the Vice Chair to move the report, the recommendation on page 153.
I move the recommendation 1.1 at page 19. The committee notes the report.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item 6, procurement strategy. I'll ask Mike Kelly, Head of Category Management, to introduce the report.
Yeah, good evening and thank you, Chair. So I bring today the annual procurement strategy update, reflected on past year's performance, as well as a recommendation in terms of what we should be focusing on in the following financial year. So I just want to welcome any comments or concerns or questions regarding the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Do we have any member? Councillor Lula Printer. Could you pull your microphone on, please?
Sorry, I thought I had. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for the report. I can. Keeps coming off. Can I?
That's all right.
It's obviously been going on for a couple of years now, and you're near the end of it. One more year left, is that right? You're meeting everything, it looks like, with a baseline, and it says on there you want comments about how you could improve in different areas. I just had a question, because it does highlight a lot of us are new councillors, and there's room for development, for our development. Is that forthcoming? Because it mentions November, but I don't know. I'm sure I'd remember. I don't think we've had any training on even your process would be really helpful. It also says the same for senior managers, but is there anything in place for us going forward? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the crux of the strategy is it gives us an opportunity to reflect on what we're doing, right? And I appreciate, I'm talking to and discussing this with new members today as well. So whilst the scores may be legacy to a degree, I also want to open it up in terms of what do we think we should be doing as well, okay? So it's quite easy for me and reading the strategy in isolation to read what an objective looks like and what a measure is and how I can take that back. But if we want to look further afield in terms of how we can develop specific things for Medway, then I'm more than open for that sort of opportunity. So I've discussed with colleagues in terms of that member development advisory group, as you reference as well, what we can do and how we can roll that out. So that is ongoing, but if there's anything specific, I'm all ears.
Do you want to come back?
Yes, please. Thank you. That's good to know. It was more along the lines of, obviously, we've had so much training. It has been good. We've had a lot of different areas across the council, new people like me, to be able to pick up on how you deal with everything. So, yes, please, basically, is the answer. If you could, it would be nice to have, even if it was just online training, just to go through how the team works and how you deal with every sort of any new items that you're coming up with. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think sometimes the issue with training, there's never a right time. Okay, so for example, later on this year, we've got the Procurement Bill coming into effect, which is going to change the national landscape of public sector procurement as well. So I'm mindful of, we can roll something out now. Actually, do we do something later on this year when we have a better idea of how we're going to, so on and so forth. So actually programming that in to make sure it's future-proof as far as it can be. But I'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your report, Michael. I'm interested really in objectives 41 to 47, which is the small and medium businesses. That most of those scores are pretty mature and have been for a few years. Can you give me some numbers of how our procurement has increased the number of small and micro businesses over the period of this plan? Just so we do encourage local businesses in Medway to thrive and flourish and pay more business rates. So I would be very interested if you could give me some numbers that go with this objective. Thank you.
So what supports these measures and objectives would be the analysis, the statistical analysis. I'm more than happy to share that afterwards as well. So as a team, we have, and it goes to our DMT, for example, which is how we've engaged with SMEs. It's typically around market engagement, actually engaging suppliers at a much earlier opportunity to bring them onto the process and actually give a level of comfort that there isn't an overly cumbersome process that supports it. But I do have that information. I'm happy to share that after this as well. It's just not my fingertips, yeah.
Thank you. Any member? Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 at page 23 that the committee note the achievements of the third year of the 2021-25 procurement strategy is outlined in Appendix 1 with updated comments. 1.2, the committee considered the delivery of actions denoted with the 2023 comments and action column against the various objectives in Appendix 1 with a concerted wider drive to improvements within the contract and relationship management as well as embedding change themes and submitted comments to Cabinet.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor Joy, is that agreed? Thanks. That brings us on to agenda item 7, Draft Capital and Revenue Budget 2024-2025. I will ask Dave Reynolds, Head of Revenue Account, to give the report, to introduce the report.
It's on. Thank you, Chair. So the draft budget was considered by Cabinet on the 21st November, and this report previously came to this committee in November, as well as being considered by all the other overview and scrutiny committees in December. At that stage, the estimated available resources were insufficient to meet the draft budget requirement, and a deficit of 35.8 million was forecast for the 24-25 financial year. Subsequently, we've had the provisional finance settlement announced via a written statement on the 19th of December 2023, an update on which was taken to Cabinet on the 16th of January. On the 24th of January, the Government announced a further 600 million funding for councils. In addition to that was outlined in the provisional settlement, that package included 500 million added to the social care grant, and while individual local authority allocations will not be known until the publication of the final local government finance settlement, which has been confirmed for the 7th of February, the proposed budget will reflect our projection that Medway will receive around £2 million through this additional allocation. Since the draft budget was produced, significant work has been ongoing with the portfolio holders, corporate management team and directorate management teams to look at how we'll be able to deliver a balanced budget for 24-25, and the proposed budget will be presented to the Cabinet on the 13th of February. Appendix 1 to the report, which starts at page 83 of your agenda packs, provides a summary of the comments made, questions asked and the responses given by officers present at all the ONS committees. While a broad range of issues were raised and discussed, none of the committees referred any specific recommendations back to this committee. It is now for this committee to determine if it wishes to refer any comments back to Cabinet to support its deliberations on the budget proposals during its meeting of the 13th of February.
Thank you, Dave. Any member? Councillor Harpwell.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It actually made very scary reading. You know, the headline that's almost on the last line of the report says that we're nearly 36 million adrift of where we need to be, with no real plans to get there. A few comments, basically. In the People Directorate, I mean, they've got to identify nearly £23 million of unidentified savings. Over the last 4 years, my recollection is that every year the People Directorate has missed their budget target and has been overspent. How do we think that the People Directorate will actually make significant savings of over 22 million if we put in the budget, bearing in mind that they've missed their targets every year for the last 4 years that I'm aware of? In the People Directorate, we mentioned things like provide care to people as one of their possible savings. This model was disbanded many, many years ago by this council, way before my time, that Medway Council, it was not deemed the right person to provide care, and it would be better to go out to outside providers. So if that is in their thinking, can we make sure that we understand what's changed now to make that a viable option? Because I don't understand what's changed. I've had plenty of questions. I'll be a little while. Since the good rating that we achieved in children's services over the hard work that was done over the last 4 years, it's mentioned in the potential savings towards the 22 million that we'll end up with less agency staff and contract staff, and therefore it will be, would be cheaper. Since the 6 months that we've had that, how many agency and contract staff have we reduced by? Does that look like it's going to be a viable option to save money? Because I'm not aware that we've had a massive exodus of contract and agency staff. So that's my questions on the people. On the RCE, there's a £500,000 line for opening the new facility. So
Sir, Councillor Hogwell, do you want him to deal with the first
if
three
you can,
first?
if you can come back to me, I've got business support and RCE to ask questions as well.
Yeah, Phil, will you want to contribute?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there were three questions there. You talked first of all about the £22 million savings target that People Services have got to make. There has been significant work undertaken already, and significant savings. Now, the
the final budget of proposals will be published on Monday, so you'll see some of that work there. And you referred to the proposal to look at in-house social care, and you asked what's changed since we took the decision not to be involved in that. Well, I think at the time the decision around not being involved in in-house care was because the cost of employing staff in those facilities, because it carried the pension strain and everything, it was cheaper to do that in the private sector. But what we're seeing, I think, is an out-of-control provider market at the moment that's, I use the term profiteering. I think I've used that term before when we've had these discussions. And so we've got to look at alternatives to reliance on the private care market. Now, part of that is to not put people in long-term care, so it's about promoting independence in their own homes. But one of the options is to look at providing that care ourselves and taking control back from the provider market. And the final thing you talked about was how we're going to reduce our reliance on agency staff. That's essentially why we've invested so much money in the proposed budget to correct pay in this organisation. Our staff our pay has not kept pace with inflation generally and with the local government sector and our peers. So the injection of cash that's been built into the proposed budget is about resetting that so that we can recruit, retain good quality staff and not be over-reliant on agency. That is the strategy.
Thank you. Gary, you want to carry on?
So you're saying that we won't have seen that reduction in staff and agency because we haven't put the pay increases in the mid pay and the 5%, etc., into process at the moment. Okay.
Sam, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I think for children's services, it's a little bit more difficult than just replacing locums because we've been using project teams because the market is quite dry at the moment. So we've had high-cost project teams in, which are on a higher rate than locums. So our first part is to reduce those project teams to bring in the stabilisation within the workforce. Then we will move to the locums. So what you haven't seen is that massive rush of locum going because we've been focusing on the project teams. That is a high cost and we have to get sustainability in. So Phil's point around the investment into the workforce is for our attraction strategy for a permanent workforce, and that's what we're focusing on. So there is a glide plan, if you like, a flight plan of how we will do that over a period of time, and that forms part of the improvement journey for children's that we will continue to do. So that is part of the savings, but no, there hasn't been a massive exit because the first focus has been for the large project teams that we've had in.
Thank you, Sam. Gary, you want to carry on?
Thank you. I'll move on to RCE. I'd like to know what the breakdown of the £500,000 for the opening of a new facility, Splashes, is in the budget line, because it doesn't include the capital interest payments because that's in the Treasury numbers. So it's a huge number for opening a new facility. If carry on, we've put something like 340,000 in for increased warden services. Why is that needed now? What will the effect? How will the effectiveness be measured? Is less fly tipping or graffiti compared to this year? And are they really necessary in every ward when this seems a luxury we're really struggling to afford as a council? So I'd like to understand why it's such a huge number and why we see it so important. Again, there's a large number of savings to be identified in the RCE, something like 7.5 million, but there is some hints in there of increased parking charges and leisure charges going up, reductions in festivals. I appreciate you said on Monday we might see a bit more detail. It just seems that there's an awful lot of stuff that we're putting in here, taken away from the public, potentially taken away from the public who are hardworking. We're going to put the additional increase of 5% for council tax, which we're limited to. I understand that. So the public are going to be asked to pay a lot more and get in a lot less. Okay, so that's the RCE, and I've got some questions on business support. If I'll come back to it.
Thank you. Dave, you would like to respond?
Yes, certainly. In terms of some of the specifics around kind of the investment in the new facility and the wardens, I think you'll see some changes to those kind of plans that in the proposed budget itself, which will become apparent on, like say, on Monday. But yeah, I mean, obviously, with a scale of savings of £7.5 million, as you said in the RC Directorate, they've obviously had to look at making some difficult decisions. Some of those are some of those things that they would like to do, maybe they won't progress with as fast as they might like to, and some of it needs to be about kind of those increase the fees and charges. I mean, in terms of our parking fees, we are quite low across if you compared us to all of the rest of Kent. So there is an argument that actually that we are kind of just rectifying and getting back to a kind of a more normal level, and obviously given our financial pressures, it's something we need to consider.
Thank you. You got more questions?
Just a few on not very many on business support, because business support have done a fantastic job and balanced their budget. I do have some questions of why we're investing in new people to do certain roles, such as the one they're looking at the single person discount. In the fact that, you know, when you've got 500 people, do we really need to employ someone else to actually to manage that? I'm sure that those 500 people, you know, one of those, a good guy could be found out of them to do that job, which he thinks is a good job. It just seems to me to, and there was a couple of people that were put into investment as well. I just think that's probably overkill to employ more people when you've got over 500 people in the directorate. I'm pleased to read that the transformation projects in benefits and customer business support has, you know, achieved over 40% of the project that we started last year. So it's a really good achievement, and let's hope that lots of other people can emulate that achievement. So I'd like to say congratulations to Paul and his team for actually achieving that. It's a fantastic achievement. Since the purchase of the low-income family tracker, how many people have been referred to the Welfare Debt and Advice Service, and how many of those people were in debt to the council and are not now in debt? As that's a new service that we invested £40,000 in, and one of the reasons was to get our debtor down. I'd just like to, you know, get some statistics around it, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. So you asked about the investor save, and you referenced the fact that the department has got 500 people working for it, but it has got a broad remit, so they're not all working in the revenues section. Our revenues and benefits, or what was the revenues and benefits team, the actual element that was responsible for local taxation is actually the smallest part of it. Most of that team was benefit assessors. And really just that team of processing business as usual, basically. You know, information that's coming in and changes to circumstances. In order to actually be proactive and search down where we've not, yeah, we're pretty lean. To be fair, the back office is really lean. That's the bit that over the last 20 years, the part of the organisation over the last 20 years, that's been the place for the easy savings. So the business support division, if you look at the stats, in fact, we were looking at some earlier today, where the reductions in our staffing have been over the last 10, 20 years, it is in the back office, it's in business support. So, you know, as you say, you know, we've got a project in cabs, and the numbers of staff that we've taken out of there already is significant. So that's the answer to that question. That's why we need to invest to save. Obviously, thank you for your comments praising Paul's team. And as for the low income tracker, I don't have that data to hand, but we'll obviously provide that for you. We'll prepare a briefing, get Gemma to do that and provide some data about the performance of that team.
Thank you. Any other member? Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations 1.1 at page 59. The committee comment on the proposals outlined in the draft capital and revenue budgets insofar as they relate to the services within the remit of this committee, to consider the comments from the individual overview and scrutiny committees as set out in Appendix 1, and determine which of these are forwarded to Cabinet, contributing to the overall comments that the Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee will feed back to Cabinet.
Is that seconded? Councillor Joy, is that agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 8, the Risk Strategy Annual Review. I will ask Sam Beckfarley, our Organisation Culture Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report represents the risk strategy for 24-25. It's an annual refresh that we do every year. Last year, the risk strategy saw a considerable refresh, so this time round it's been very light touch. Very little comments have come back in terms of changing the way that we are managing risk. This report also went to Audit Committee on the 10th of January. There were some suggestions made, and you can find those documented under paragraph 7.3. Members have suggested that we make it clear within the report that we note who's in the security and information group, so that has been added. Another point of discussion was around whether or not we needed to disaggregate between the likelihood of something happening and the likelihood of it being detected. From further investigation into what this might look like, we've determined that this will come under the mitigation, which will therefore change the end score, so that one hasn't been taken forward. So tonight, committee members are asked to note the strategy and raise any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Any member? Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations 1.1 at page 93. The committee considered the 24-25 risk strategy as set out in Appendix 1 to the report and submitted comments to Cabinet.
Is that seconded? Councillor Joy. Is that agreed? That brings us on to agenda item 9, update on response to employee survey 2022. I'll ask Sam Beckfarley, Chief Organisation Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This report is at the request of this committee. You will recall that the Employee Engagement Survey was undertaken in September 2022. From that, we've done a number of activities across the organisation where we worked with colleagues and corporate management team members, and from that we formulated our engagement strategy, which is set out and has an action plan, and you can find that attached within the reports at Appendix 1. We've also at the time requested that we move our annual survey point from September through to May. That did raise some questions around the drift and the fact that we were going to be going 8 months later in terms of measuring our success. So at the request of the committee, we've come back this evening just to give some assurances around the work that we've focused on as a result of the engagement strategy and the work that is ongoing. And all of that can be detailed under 4.1 in the report. There's a couple of things I would like to highlight because I think we've got a lot of activity happening. We haven't stopped on the activity and don't intend to. The fact that we have a survey means we will just continue. That's a measure to see how well we're doing. But a couple of key areas in particular is our ways of working. So with the partial closure of Gunwharf that took place, we put a pulse survey out to our staff in December. The point of that survey really was to see how people were coping, working at home again unexpectedly, and also to gather some views about how we might work in the future and what that might mean. And I think one of the things you'll find throughout all of the actions is we're very keen to engage with the workforce and give the workforce a voice. Communication and engagement, we do much more in terms of our virtual drop-ins, making sure that we're taking account to those who are not just in our corporate buildings. There's been a number of workplace topics that have gone through this, for example, employee benefit providers. We've done a financial financial cost of living support engagement event. We've done a lot of work around our council values. We've also launched a new conversation framework called Let's Talk. The purpose of that is to equip our senior managers with valuable information so that they can really talk to the workforce about the key things that are going on and can create the conversation that creates a two-flow way of information, both from the top down, but also that feedback coming back. We've made use of more communication channels, so we're making much more use of things like videos, quarterly roundups, HR monthly newsletters, regular staff newsletters, as well as a service manager's need-to-know communication channel, because we're acutely aware of the volume of emails. It's very difficult sometimes for senior leaders to stay on top of all the important things. In terms of our pay and reward, our Medway review, which is our performance progression and pay, is ongoing. So we've completed the pilot, we've onboarded now phase 2 and phase 3, and that continues to roll out. That's not just about correcting pay, it's also about career progression, it's also about people feeling valued and rewarded for the skills and experience that they bring to the organisation. And that goes part into a development of a recognition strategy where we're looking at other recognition across the organisation. At Employment Matters Committee on Tuesday, we spoke further around what the cost of living award might be this year, but also focusing on things like annual leave for the lower grades and correcting the bottom of the band. So the pay review and making a fit-for-purpose pay structure and board structure is ongoing and is fundamental to our engagement work. Mental health and wellbeing is absolutely key for us. We have a very active Healthy Minds group that is a collaboration across the organisation led by HR and public health. A number of resources have been put together through that group throughout the year, things that are focused on mental health resources so that line managers can understand how far their role is before it becomes a medical intervention, as well as simple things like a campaign around press pause, where it's encouraging people to take regular breaks. And behaviours and values, work around equality, diversity and inclusion continues. We're launching our new equality, diversity and inclusion strategy that's been signed off by Employment Matters Committee. We've worked with the organisation to develop our new values, which are set to launch in April. And all of that work also underpins the work around bullying and harassment and deep dives that we might need to do across the organisation because of pockets of culture that might need addressing. A list of all actions can be found in Appendix 1. They are reviewed and monitored, as I mentioned, and the next survey will be live in May, so we will measure our progression at that point. So it's recommended tonight that Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee note the work that we've got going on within the engagement strategy. By all means, ask questions. I'm happy to take them, but the report is to give assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Having a look at the infographics, one of the big things that did stand out with communication with employees throughout the council, with quite a lot of them feeling that the communication wasn't up to required levels. Something we've brought up earlier with Councillor Curry regarding communications, and sometimes actually communicating stuff and making sure that people are aware where it is seems to be on two different channels. I just went with regards to the communication, are we making it easier for council employees to be able to communicate and also engage with what's happening and what's being done with regards to that? Also, with regards to the changing in pay, has there been any engagement with members of the officer staff of how they feel about the way it is going? And one of the big things is when you're looking at somebody is whether they see themselves in 2 or 5 sort of years. Are we getting more people actually being happy to be working with the council and are planning to stay here a bit more long term? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. In terms of communication, I mentioned the virtual drop-ins. That seems to be the most preferred method of communication for people to come along and hear about topics, but also feed in about topics. So we've done a lot more around that. So most definitely the announcement of the survey results and the work that we wanted to undertake, we soundproofed that and tested that within the workforce, and that was through those face-to-face workshops and the virtual drop-in sessions. The values work that we've done, that came out of the survey, but then we further developed that by running a number of staff sessions with staff to talk about what was coming out of them, how they're positioned, but also what does it mean mean to live that value in Medway, and that's enabled a number of people to step forward and want to almost do a bit of case studies around how they live the value and why it's important to them. And that's not about senior leaders talking about it, it's about the workforce talking about it, because it has to matter to the workforce. And that most definitely, I would say, has increased considerably. Part of the senior leadership visibility also came out within the communications. So senior leaders now are much more visible. The chief executive has a bit of a roadshow where he goes along to meet the teams per day, and it's a free format, so they can talk about whatever they want to with the chief executive. There's also plans to do all staff events, so all staff will be invited to a senior leaders event. And that stuff hasn't happened before, so we haven't tested that yet, but that's in the pipeline because people said they wanted to hear from senior leaders a lot more. The element of teams, so the service manager channel, for example, that's making sure that the communication is accurate and consistent. So we're putting it, very simply for service managers to deliver the message. But on all of the topics that we're sending out, whether it's the pay award, whether it's values, whether it's about any of the engagement strategies, the EDI strategy, there is a loop of feedback. And our main vehicle for that is something called the Medway Makers. So we have a collaboration of staff who represent everybody across the organisation. And they come along to the Medway Makers, and it's about making Medway for people. So we talk about all people-related issues. And that's a free format where anything can be raised. So there is no limits on what can come up, and we try and triage that to the right area to help with that and keep that feedback loop. It's a very active group, it's a very great collaboration group, and there's a lot of passion in the room, which is really, really good. So that is growing constantly. I don't know when we say we've got too many, because there's a lot of people there, but it's really good to have people that want to be involved. And it's not just people that are based in Gunwharf, it's from so theatres, for example, leisure centres. It's making sure we're covering all of those sites. So I'll be quite interested to see those scores in the new survey in May, given that we've increased those communication routes throughout the year through various mechanisms. The other point you mentioned was around the pay and whether or not the workforce had been engaged and whether they wanted to stay. Part of us doing a pilot around the Med Pay review was to do exactly that, to test what we thought, to try it in an area and seek that feedback from a cohort of people. So there was about 200 people that went through that first pilot. It's very transparent. They were part of the design, making sure that it was fit for purpose, creating those career pathways. And that work has been ongoing. So we've done, again, a number of events across the organisation, even for those who are not in the pilot, talking about the principles and what we need to do. And we've iterated it as we've gone. So if something isn't working, we've gone back and changed it. We took an evaluation report to Employment Matters Committee on Tuesday. The evaluation will be ongoing for some time because we haven't got to the first skills assessment yet. But each stage we're doing the evaluation report. We're looking at the diversity impact assessment and the impact on the workforce. And we're being very transparent about that back to the workforce. And none of that is a secret. We're not doing it in a closed room and doing it to people. People are part of that journey. In terms of our end of year pay award, one of the things we measure in the survey is satisfaction around pay, and you will see that there was no surprises. That wasn't very high in terms of people feeling satisfied, as well as the reward package. And one of the things we've done is promise to look at consistency and fairness, and that's why part of this year's pay award is also focused on levelling off annual leave, because one of the things that came out of the survey was people wanting more time off. It's not necessarily at the higher grades, it's at the lower grades where there's a disparity, and we've put in long service awards at 10 and 15 years. So again, all of that information has come from our workforce. It's not just what we think is a nice thing to do. So we have engaged with them on the way. Trade union also, we've engaged with trade union. They put in a pay claim. We're part of a pay protocol locally on local conditions. So that's been an ongoing dialogue right from October, when members put forward what they'd like to see within the pay review. And on Tuesday night Employment Matters Committee, it was probably one of the first times since I've been with Medway Council that trade unions felt in a position that they could go away and recommend the pay to members. So I think our listening and putting forward a transparent pay approach is working.
Thank you for that. Just one other comment. It's also good having people like Richard Hicks in their position, Mark Brethwick, a recent addition to assistant directors, because I'm fully aware that both of them started right at the bottom. So it shows we've got examples of progression from the lowest levels through to the higher levels. So that is really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. And thank you, Sam, for your answer. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sam. It's just some brief ones, really, so you don't need to... It's the normal one I bring out every time. I'm going to ask you, is the survey... So the survey goes out again in March, is that April, May, and it is going to be yearly, because that's what was promised last night. It definitely will be yearly on this one. Okay, brilliant. And it's just a really quick one. The Pulse survey, was in December, so it doesn't have to be at the next one, but whether we could get a briefing on that, because it was about the hybrid working. Because I suppose my concern is now, because of Gunwolf, I know there has been staff relocated in some places. A lot of staff have had to work at home again, so it's that. I'm just worried about the isolation and loneliness element. I know, you know, it sounds a bit soft, but actually it did impact a lot of people during COVID. So it would be really good to see what people's thoughts are, maybe like in a briefing paper from that. A really quick one about Medway makers. Is that then in the inclusion part? Is that around certain groups of individuals you're going to bring back? So who's going to have the LGBT, who's going to have the ethnic minority workers? You was talking about bringing those back because it used to be very strong in Medway, and it's just whether that is that being sort of put into the money, the Medway Makers programme or not? It's just a quick question around that. The final one is just the bullying and harassment. Now, it's nice to see that the action plan, but all it says is we'll be addressing bullying and harassment. There's probably loads more behind it, and I can imagine there is on your policies. I suppose it's just a really quick answer about reassurance that if bullying and harassment is going on now, it's being dealt with really swiftly and effectively. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McDonough. Sam, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. I mean, absolutely, in terms of the briefing around the pulse survey, lots of really valuable information in there, and it's helping us make our decisions now. I think just to give you some headlines from that, 60% of the people that filled in the survey are okay with the way they're working, but it was 80%, 86% prior to how they're working. So we know that it's not perfect the way we've got it at the moment, although people are coping. So I think that's a lot of the decisions around what our future looks like as Medway Council. In terms of the loneliness and social isolation, on average between about 15 and 20% have reported it's got worse. And then again, we're feeding that back into the Healthy Minds and working group. And one of the things that has come out as a key thing is some of the softer stuff that we do around like craft group or book group or lunchtime walks, that kind of thing. And it's more that social element of it. But we've got a whole raft of stuff. And again, really pleasing, lots of work to do, but really pleasing. There was over 700 comments around extra stuff that people wanted to put into the mix. So I think people do want to be heard. They know they're going to be heard. And that seems to be working. But more than happy to do a briefing around that. It is due to go to Employment Matters Committee next, so perhaps it can come on to this committee following that. The Medway Makers, that's not, I mean, if people are part of, for example, the Disability and Carers Network, they can be a Medway Maker. There's no rules, you can't do both. Obviously, time is limited in how much time you get given corporately to attend some of these. But the Medway Makers is just generally engagement. So we still have the Disability and Carers Network, our LGBTQT plus network and our BAME network is not very active. We've got an equality board that runs and sits every quarter, but we're just in the process of refreshing that and looking at a different way of doing that to enable this EDI strategy to have some more power behind it. At the next service managers meeting, we've got a bit of an honest conversation around the culture in Medway that picks up on behaviours and perhaps some of these protected characteristics and what more we need to do to understand the organisation. And again, with the protected characteristics, what seems to be coming back from the workforce is there isn't major issues that people feel they need a network for, but there's other things like a carers network or a single parents network, so not necessarily a protected characteristic, but other support mechanisms that we need to be looking at in addition. So quite a bit of work there to do. We're also working with public health around Turning the Tide, which is an NHS initiative around ethnicity, but we're doing it across ethnicity, disability as well. And part of that is the engagement piece to actually focus on the right thing rather than what we assume is going on in the organisation. So that will be the first point that we will kick off with that, which will feed back into the Equality Board. And then finally on bullying and harassment, it doesn't say much. What we've done is some deep dives where we had concerns or issues. We have the new Speak Up policy, which was the whistleblowing policy. So there's a group of 3 people, which myself and Phil sit on, as well as the monitoring officer, Bhupinder. And we regularly review trends, activity, time it takes to do the cases. And we also then take feedback from people who have been part of a case to make sure that we're doing it better. We've also put in place 2 in-house investigators to speed the process up. So there's probably a number of more operational stuff that's happening to make this an easier area to tackle. I think at the last, I'm sure it might have been at the last EMC we went to, there was a report on bullying harassment that came forward, and there's more cases on there, which is a good thing. So I think, you know, people are, not bullying harassment, sorry, whistleblowing. So people are feeling that they can talk to that. Part of moving forward, I've got some vacancies that I haven't been able to fill within my team. We are looking to invest in that team to make sure the policies are better, the procedures are better. We're running out of managers training at the moment that's talking about how to be a Medway manager. So appreciate you might come with loads of experience as a manager, but actually in Medway we might have a different policy, a different way of doing things. So we're investing heavily, and that's training for every manager, which will form part of the induction pack. So there's quite a few things happening underneath to make sure that we're being the best we can in that subject area.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Councillor, and thanks, Sam, for your elaborate answer. Councillor Printer.
Thank you. It's good to see that you've listened to the staff survey and delivered this report with actions and the progress we've made so far. You've mentioned trade unions. So really, I know most people think that trade unions are just about demanding pay rises and standing on picket lines, but progressive trade unions are actually more than that. Can I ask what engagement you've had with trade unions in, one, the actions, and also how to deliver this? Also, just on mental health, I see there's a resource for line managers. However, many organisations now are having mental health first aiders with training delivered by Samaritans, etc. Is that something that we're bringing in the Medway Council? And if we are, how are we rewarding their mental health first aiders? Because many organisations do the same as they do people who put their hand up to be a first aider. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Councillor Printer. Sam, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Councillor Prenter. In terms of our trade union relationships, I would say we've got very strong trade union relationships. We meet informally every 2 weeks just to talk about what's happening in the organisation, to keep that dialogue going, the kind of mood within the organisation and any initiatives that we've got on. We have a consultative committee that meets every quarter where we put much more substantial agenda items on, and that feeds into the joint consultative committee that sits before EMC. So we have quite a good structure, but it's not just formal, it's the informal part as well. I would say across the actions, trade unions have had the survey results. We spoke to them at the beginning about what we plan to do. They've helped us influence some of those areas. We've worked on particular things like disability. One of the points that was raised by the trade unions was our phased return to work. In the policy it states it's typically 4 weeks. Some of the challenges have been actually if somebody's got a disability, should it be longer? What should be the flexibilities around that? So we're learning from the unions as we go and working with the unions to make adaptations to the policies that's going to make it easier in terms of our staff. Another area we've looked at is the gender pay gap, so we're working with for them around women's health and what that might mean. So I couldn't give you a list, but that kind of ongoing dialogue, I would say, is there. I think we've got a good working relationship where it's seen as one that can help each other as opposed to a battle. And most definitely our main provider is Unison. GMB are not currently present with us at the moment, but we're very close with Unison and we'll engage with them whenever we need to. In terms of mental health first aid advisors, we do have mental health first aid advisors. There was training that was done for that. That is governed as part of the wellbeing group, and it's led predominantly by public health. So we have had the training in, and that is there. Some of the feedback from our actual champions, though, has been like the line managers, where is the threshold between where you can offer support and it's actually a medical intervention that's required? So we have had some real difficulty with some real serious mental health cases, and I think it's not necessarily the signposting what's available talking to people. I think we can do that quite well, and if you look at the survey results, you know, most definitely people are saying that managers are talking to them about mental health. I think it's when someone genuinely is suffering and they don't know what to do and they're caught in the system, what is our role as an employer and how far do we go in that duty of care? And I think that's where the champions are finding some difficulty. So this additional resource really is not to say there's a cut-off point where your managerial role stops, but what does that kind of medical professional area look like, and who can you talk to and who can you get that help from, and can you request a triage, for example, with one of the practitioners and our occupational health in that regard. So it's probably that when it gets really tough, what are the options in terms of that support material that's there? We have yet to roll that out and trial it and get the feedback on it, but again, that was feedback from that particular champion group and managers in terms of what they felt was missing for them. So that will continue moving forward. And sorry, I think, was that all your questions? Was there one more? Obviously, the training is there. We don't expect people to do it without coaching and training. And corporately, you're allowed a percentage of time off to fulfil your role, whether or not it's within the Medway makers, a mental health champion role. In terms of financial reward, the only reward that we have in place is for those that occupy a first aid position or a fire warden position. We don't have any additional financial award for any of the other champions that come forward.
Would you like to come back?
Yes, please.
Yes, come.
Firstly, it's good to hear you've got a good relationship with the trade unions, which I didn't doubt personally. Just personally, I think they should be treated, mental health first aiders, you do it for first aiders, you do it for fire wardens. I see them very similar in their role, and mental health, as you know, is becoming larger and larger, especially with the loneliness, especially if you're working from home. And many of, not all at Gunwharf, as you've said earlier, we need to make sure we can outreach to them people who may be working alone in locations or either at their home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brent. Would you like to make a comment?
No, great suggestion. We'll take that away and have a look at it. Thank you, Councillor Pinter.
Thank you. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair.
The committee note this report and also request a briefing note on isolation and hybrid working.
Is that seconded? Councillor McDonald. Is that agreed? That brings us on to agenda item 10. I will ask Steve Dickens, Democratic Services Officer, to introduce the report.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to note on your work programme. The committee will receive a report relating to the sponsorship and advertising policy in April, and we will also receive the local plan. That's on a date to be determined at the moment. The Medway North report and the annual petitions report has been postponed to the first meeting of the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Do we have any member? Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations 1.1 and 1.2 at page 153. The committee agree the work programme at Appendix 1 to the report. The committee note the work programmes of the other overview and scrutiny committees at Appendix 2.
Is that seconded? Councillor Joy. Is that agreed? Thank you. That brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you.